Well, hello there, and welcome to Consciousness Caffeine Radio. I'm Rainbow Warrior Goddess Lisa, and today we have a rocksome show for you today. I hope everyone is having a really wacky, wild, wonderful Wednesday. Today we have Sevan Bomar as our special guest today, and he's a specialist in lifestyle advancement and in self-development. He's also the creator of Secret Energy, a social media network with thousands of members pioneering open source spirituality, which utilizes the collective intelligence of its members to solve life's most complex metaphysical riddles. Sevan is an inventor, author, and motivational speaker that enjoys giving the knowledge and application necessary to instruct others on how to manifest vast projections. He is the author of The Code to the Matrix, inventor of the Phi Aqua water programmer, and developer of Spiritech, a company that employs conscious people. Well, that's only just the tip of the iceberg who Sevan is. And today he is here to speak with me and my co-host about conspiracy, the secrets of the English language. Brett Starr, what do you have to say on this wild Wednesday to the crowd?
Hey guys, how you doing? Brett Slater, Brett Starr, the Depth Master. Actually, it's pretty dark here. It's nighttime in Bali. It's 10 o'clock. I've been waiting all day for this interview. I've been reading up on you. You sound like a dude that I really want to get to know. There's so much on your website. I don't even know where to start. But Lisa's known you for a long time by the sounds of it. And she was so excited about getting you on board. Thank you so much for turning up. And what time is it over there in LA?
Actually, I'm over here. I'm actually in Costa Rica, but it's 8 a.m. And, you know, it's kind of the same time zone. And obviously, you know, I'm super excited to be on the show. Thanks so much for having me on. And, you know, it's an amazing time for all of us, you know, more so than ever. And that's just because, you know, we're so much more aware, right? So every time we get a chance to share and to collaborate, you know, something special happens as we continue to co-create with one another.
Absolutely. And I just love it. It's like hanging out with you. It's not really like an interview. It's just having really higher conscious conversation that I've been dying to have these kinds of conversations my entire life, and have them with my friends like Brett, sometimes too much now that I have the radio show. Hopefully it'll put it back a little bit more balance back into it. But you and I haven't had an interview in a while, and it's so really nice to start up on the new 2.0 version of Consciousness Caffeine. Here we have conversations and interviews on topics such as re-education, healing, inspiration, conscious co-creation, sovereignty, the whole deal, everything that you talk about. So you're the perfect guest because you go in all those areas.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just start off with you telling a little bit of your Seven Self story. It's an amazing one, but just a brief version, and then we can get onto the topic because I can't wait to cover this topic with you.
Okay, for sure. You know, for those who haven't heard of me, you know, obviously I'm not Tom Cruise, so there's going to be some people that haven't heard of who I am. And you know, just to give a brief synopsis, what I've done is basically I've studied spirituality. I've had the opportunity to study spirituality and metaphysics, et cetera, my entire life. My mother brought us into it very early, and instead of cartoons and many other things, that we were just given spiritual content and spiritual lore as our form of entertainment. And I was homeschooled and I was trained in many ways. So I actually was able to learn how to sew, to work on cars, and quite a few different things, you know, before I even reached my teens. So I kind of had this very eclectic childhood. Then I had like the slingshot effect though, because, you know, that was kind of like completely sheltered away from the way the world was. So when I got into my early teens, kind of ran away and started experiencing the world, but, you know, at like 1,000% because of, you know, the previous kind of boring environment in my mind that I had just recently came out of. And this allowed me to really get a broad spectrum by my mid-20s of exactly what the world consists of. And because I had a very strong spiritual background, like the seeds were planted, they kind of started budding in my mid-20s. And I was always a person having these spiritual encounters or experiences, you know, whether it was going on in my dreams or whether it was a voice that I would be hearing during certain situations. And, you know, so I've always had this guidance since, again, that I've been doing that since I was younger, but I didn't really start to explore it from from the depths until I reached my mid-20s, when I went through a sequence of activations that I actually didn't look to cause. It was even before then that I really started studying metaphysics. So just so it's understood, when I first began as a child, we really studied this from a deeply spiritual standpoint with religions and dogma. So I understood everything about that you can think of. But metaphysics, which of course seeks to explain the unexplainable, I didn't really have a grasp on. So until I got into my mid-20s, and actually more towards almost to my 30s, I hadn't studied really anything that gave me an explanation for what exactly I was experiencing. So obviously, when I started to study it, I was amazed at not only the sequence of what was being explained based on the encounters that I had. I was also able to make heads and tails of my experience. And this kind of simultaneously happened around the time of a massive activation that I went through when just experimenting in one tense with a mantra. And I ended up going into a completely different stage of my own consciousness, basically full-blown chakra activation for 2 weeks.
What mantra? What mantra?
I'm not telling.
Come on, man.
Yeah, I can't. Like, it's not even that I'm trying to keep that final secret. It's just that I realized, actually, and this is a big part of it. I realized that there was so many things. Well, let's just say in specific, there were things that you can do that had an effect that if you didn't know exactly what you were doing, it could mess you up for life. And it's a serious thing. Obviously, there's people that are even in Jerusalem. They call it the Jerusalem syndrome. So there's people who have used words out of the Kabbalah and repeated those words over and over, and then had something happen, and then in a certain sense had their mind kind of stripped to where they actually can't really perceive reality the way it was before. And for many people, they just think, hey, this person's gone crazy. So they tend to have to put these kind of people away. But in that experience, I really learned that the spiritual world was not only real, but also that there were integers to it that I should understand more. Because again, having anyone who's even opened the third eye knows how, just it's a lot. DMT, ayahuasca, any kind of substance give you a moment for that. So I think I had at least accomplished opening 3 or 4 chakras and not even having any foreground of what I had even done. And so that took me through this process. And I guess because I had already the spiritual background and also a extremely logical mind, because I'm a computer engineer and I've always worked with computers as a trade. So this kind of gave me some foundation to stand on while I was going through this experience. So I basically was able to say, well, let me try to understand more about what's going on and let me just listen. So let me, instead of freaking out and, just kind of going crazy, because that's kind of the part that happens first, let me try to level out and hear what this voice is saying and see what I'm being instructed to do. And that started me on this segment of adventure. Now we're about 8 years from now, and I've done a lot. Like, there's a lot of content. There's a lot of people involved with the network. There's inventions. There's an affiliate program. There's hours and hours of free knowledge. And so really, I proved for myself, because I think at the end of the day, you still have to motivate yourself, that there was nothing to fear in doing something amazing, and to never assume that what you can accomplish, if it was possible, it would have been done already, because we're living in a lifespan, which is basically this max, let's say on average, 72 years of your particular existence, your awareness, not history, not future, but your existence in this world. And what you choose to accomplish, you begin to find that, which is a trinary code, that you can actually have this entire reality as yours. You could actually do something here that will change the entire structure of how it's designed if you choose to. And so, of course, we're constantly fighting, well, how could that be possible? There's 8 billion people in the world, and that's binary thinking. But we learn to, and I've learned to move on to, okay, well, just what am I going to do today? Because there actually is no limit. Sky is not the limit. There is no limit at all. So that's kind of a beginning. I know it's very rough, but just so people understand, I have pretty much a very strong grasp on spiritual knowledge and experience, which is most important, which kind of equals wisdom to me. And then also a very strong, okay, well, where does it all connect though? Because contrary to what most people believe about spirituality, that it's just invisible and it goes on nowhere, there actually are some very strong underpinnings and connections and fabrics and geometries and things that correspond to everything that actually occurs under the sun. So we can actually really map out, where does manifestation come from? Where does high levels of knowledge come from? Where does channeling information come from? How is it actually done? So what I've done is I've spent the last at least 3 or 4 years, I call it demystifying, because obviously the term mysticism is very similar to the word mist. So it means basically to put a fog or something around things so a person can't see it. And that's actually what a cult means too. It means to hide something so someone doesn't discover it. And so demystifying things actually pushes all that smoke and all that mist out of the way, and it allows a person to see clearly themselves. And that's actually the biggest thing about what's different about what we do, is the person is a central character in the theme. We've already basically debunked the gods, not as that they don't exist, but as they can be quite counterproductive for a person's energetic center if they don't learn how to rely on themselves and how their energy works, etc. So, it started off, as a quite amazing thing, because we found that now thousands of people have gravitated towards the knowledge because and the wisdom and the experience, etc. And it's just because what they're going through too. And it's just sometimes explained in a different way, maybe, and it just confirms things, it fills in the puzzle, etc. So I feel like we're all doing that for each other. And one of my main things that I place emphasis on is vivid. Like, I gotta see it work, because it's possible. We demand that we see clearly what's happening, and that way we don't get too caught up in our minds and into guessing and all those kind of things, which is kind of a shaky foundation to stand on. But it's interesting enough that when we demand and we ask for clear indications and clear signs and clear formulas of how to cause spiritual phenomena, we actually get it. And so this is something very rare. We're still underground. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I think everything is, well, I know everything is staged in a level of synchronicity. And now we're reaching our next stage. And I guess you're also doing the 2.0. So it's like, for us, we finally have the ability to also go to our next stage. We've obviously gone through several successions of stages, and each one is quantum. So every time you're going to make a quantum leap, now there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of different synchronicities and things that must be aligned in order to accomplish that. However, that's all the stuff that we've been putting together now. And so this is what we're doing for each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. I thought of it perfect. It's like the consciousness fascia. The thing that connects all the organs that are floating around to your skin and the body, and that they're
exactly
separate. And also, that was a perfect explanation about how the mantra took you into your first altered state like that, because I put in the explanation, today's topic is conspiracy and the secrets of the English language. And I've played with this for a long time, but the English language is the only language that it's actually called spelling, what you write down that you speak. In other languages, it's usually dictation. And the English language is very much a huge spell that's been cast. And it also shows you the power of not only the words we use, but to create our reality. So that's what I actually wrote. It was perfect that you just went the way you did it, and to give us a little nutshell of what is in the amazing life of Sevan Bomar.
Well, yeah, I mean, just to chime into that, most definitely, what we want to get into today is definitely taking apart the language a bit, just to kind of demystify it and show the obvious. And obviously the ancient use for languages is deeply spiritual evocation level, meaning that language only had a purpose of creation, because that's what it does. It brings these waves into this waves of light, which are sound, into this reality in order to manifest. And the first time any word was uttered, that was already understood. And on top of that, the power of the first utterance of the word, which they actually call the lost word, it actually leads us into realizing that what's happened is with languages is that it's something that's so powerful. If it ever falls into the hands of something that's in balance, which is how we can be at times, then it can actually begin this never-ending cycle of, almost like just guesswork. I call it the quest, because it's just like all these questions start arising, because no longer for a while do people even know what they're doing when they utter these words of languages. And English, of course, is a bit more tricky, because it's more or less a hodgepodge of hieratic and demotic script. It is very occult related, but it's also designed in itself to be partially hidden. And this is, of course, why we get the 26 letters in the alphabet, and then you times that by 2, and you get 52, which gives you 52 weeks in the year. It also gives you 52 cards in a deck, which is, of course, the American Tarot. And then it basically starts the process of being a cabal or a cable, which is where the word comes from, meaning that the beginning must connect to the end. So that's why it's always like an A to Z kind of thing. But in this case, there's an entire half of English that's actually missing. And this was actually one of the main ways that I came into this level of awareness, how it had to be translated to me. Because I guess, let's say, for instance, your higher self wants to show you what it really is. They want to rip back the curtain of the looking glass and show you what's really behind all of this. It has to use some kind of integer to communicate that to you. Just like our dreams can only use the visions of different animals and people we know and places to try to communicate to us something that is actually just in a light code. And so when I brought in this knowledge and information, it actually came through the language of me just being instructed by my higher self, or shown that, hey, this language that you're speaking, and it kind of came in riddles, like, hey, it was basically said, hey, Sevan, or hey, James, you like to play games. And you're looking for light, but you need to get light. You know, you have too much weight, so you'll wait. And then even that riddle alone was just like, wait a minute, like all those words are like this, they sound the same, but they're all spelled differently. And then when I would be saying something like that in my mind, it would respond exactly, because the words are backwards. Look at it, backwards. The words are backwards. So the direction that the language is actually going, you need to research that. So I can only give people now the conclusion of it, since I did all of that studying and research. But basically the direction our language is moving is actually towards the direction of death. That's actually the direction that the clock moves. And for people to like think of that, oh man, I don't believe that that's true. Just think about it. Like, just symbolically, let's say just your standard old analog clock, that direction, it actually is the direction of death, just even hypothetically, because we all look at it to get older, right? It's like, okay, oh, time passed, oh shit, a year, oh no. So
that shit never stops.
Right. So it's like, I think at a certain point, if we stop wanting to tell ourselves the great things all the time, and then also realize I don't know if you can even call them not so great, but that's how people judge things, then you can see the entire picture. So it's like, oh, okay, well, that's the direction of death. So once you know the direction of death, then you also know the direction of life. And this is kind of how the whole thing works, is if you're willing to accept the yang, then you can actually reverse engineer and get the yin. So there's nothing wrong then with it analyzing some of this stuff that sometimes, or in most cases, is off limits for us to begin to analyze, to repair ourselves. Okay, because look at the word repair. So put the two back together. So we can even go back further and say, well, when did the two ever split? And this is, of course, in the beginning, there was a splitting between the male and the female, where now they're in two different bodies. They contain the essence of those in each other, but there's some kind of imbalance going on. And this is also seen with why a person predominantly uses one hand than the other. So it's not necessarily just stopping at like, okay, well, yeah, there's an imbalance and the balance was caused by this and blah, blah, blah. It's finding exactly how that exists on all levels, because that's the knowledge that we have. That's the ability we have. That's, you know, what is called as above, so below, which are like old Asian proverbs, nothing to do with the OTO and the Golden Dawn and Crowley, but as above, so below. So you would be able to do things here that can affect things of what's going on, let's say, quote unquote, up there. And then things up there that you can do, which is your higher self, the higher manifestation aspect of yourself, can do things there that affect things here. But you also can start to realize, well, which one should I really begin with first? Or which one do I have the most bearing in? And that's kind of really where the zodiac thing comes into play. It's because you have like, let's say everyone has a different gift. Everyone has a unique aspect of themselves. And that kind of corresponds to the fingerprint, which if you look at the fingerprint, it's literally a spiral to show you kind of, this is your spin on it. Like somebody say, oh, this is my spin on it. Okay. So that person's spin is a unique spin. And this is what makes it like so crazy on the planet, because if you're in the judging, actually a person's uniqueness is what you're not going to like, because it's not right. And that's where the conflicts come in. But if we can readapt, like what went on in the ancestral setting, actually ancestors were always trying to teach each new being that came out what their uniqueness was, because that's how you were going to make your way in the world. And I think anyone that has discovered their uniqueness and finally figures out a way to make their way in the world with it actually reach happiness and fulfillment, versus someone who actually may be engaged in, you know, what the matrix, fake matrix, I'll say for sure, the fake matrix wants us to do. Then of course they're all out of place. They're in a cubicle somewhere building somebody else's egregor or eidolon, right? So what happens is that in all of this, you know, there's just, I always see it like, always, I'm pure optimist. So it's because I don't end, I'm limitless. So literally what happens is anytime I feel like that, okay, well, this was a limited situation, then it only actually should motivate me to see what this thing is actually going to turn into. And because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a group of beings that are actually not even born yet. Like basically, it's from the truest extent, you're still in actually the incubator. So of course, when you're looking at things and it's like, you know, this is really off, like this person and what they're doing and that group and what they're doing, but they're all in their still premature phase. It's like trying to go and look at a baby at 6 months or, you know, the second trimester, and then acting like this is supposed to have a beard and, you know, and developed breasts and all these different things. It's not actually set up like that. And if we would take the time to look at the real matrix, and this is why I was saying there's two different ones here that often get confused. The real matrix is nature. And if we look at nature, the matrix, and then we start seeing how that process goes, then we're saying, oh, okay, well, I'm still in the gestation phase. I'm actually still inside the cell. Now look at that word, the cell, and then the prism. Okay, so the prison. Okay, right? So this is the same thing. It's like, okay, well, did you go to jail? Did you get some time? And sure enough,
wait a minute,
people here.
I have to interject here. I have to interject. I have to share this. You know, I've always called time my most unfavorite 4-letter word. Down here.
Well, there's another one. So it's time in the prism.
Yeah.
Which of course is the cognate of the word prison. It basically means that division that goes on when you shine light in the prism creates race. Colors. It creates what appears to be something different, but all comes from the same thing. And once that race begins, it's an arms race. Everyone racing back to the beginning of what you read in the script where they split Adam. Okay, look at it. There's a race that went on in the world for people to get back nuclear technology so they can split Adam again to create this wonder weapon, one waff, right? So they can do it. It's the same thing that they always do, right? And this is just that kind of state of consciousness, right? It doesn't actually happen for everyone. It happens for that state of consciousness and others that adapt that state of consciousness, which is duality. But listen to this. That last time, because there was like, I marked on their origins. If you want to go to origins, the origins of the physical realities, the last book, the last chapter in the saga was actually on a planet that instead of creating stuff out of, what is this? Gypsum and sheetrock and cement, we were using crystals and glass to build because it's like common sense. Like, I mean, why not build out of materials that are going to amplify everything that you're doing? Okay, so the last setup actually had at least got to the point where they realized, and this is where all these Atlantean stories come from. They got to the point they realized, well, shoot, let's build everything to resonate at different frequencies. Let's not use any dense materials. But they still got to that actual point of their own division, which was the whole fallout that you're reading about in the Bhagavad Gita's in the Upanishads, where basically it went to a point of splitting Adam again. And then now, so this is what happens in time. The distance between the next, from where we are and the next projection, I won't even call it a planet, the next projection from either side is either extremely primitive or extremely advanced. So this means that communication doesn't really work really well. So meaning if we take a human from here and we put them in a very advanced projection, which is, let's say, the one to the left, the beings there are going to be like, send them back. You're not even going to be able to get in there. The vibration is going to be so high, smear off your body ID before you even make the trip, right? But then there's another one, which is like primal. It's like dinosaurs still living there, old macrobes and archons. And when you get to that one, it's like, okay, we're definitely starting from ground zero. So what actually happened, and this is like just putting two and two together, just simplicity. It doesn't take even having to believe in anything. Is when the last one exploded, which is the projections that we're calling star dust, it basically projected all of those materials onto the next projection. And this is like Brett's in the mining in Canada, they have entire veins that they've been able to prove were actually because a star is embedded there. So basically the star became the entire vein. So and listen, because listen, that basically a star that is made out of, let's say, complete iron can smash down into earth and burrow down so deep. And then later on, we'll call that an iron vein. We'll be like, okay, yeah, there's like a huge deposit of iron or granite right here. Let's go ahead and start mining it. But then when you ask in physics and all of that, or in geology, where did that come from? They say, well, that's a star there that fell and it's embedded and now it's covered, and that's the vein. And it's because, okay, newsflash, these are fragments from the last projection. Yeah. Basically, when those fragments explode, they become like falling stars. So then, now just remember, this is entire civilization. So there's also key pieces, and this is what people may forget of why there's actually relics. Because just like right now, there are things in the world that have been put together or have always existed that were fragments of the control modules or main center points of the last civilization. So anyone who has one of those, or it has mystical powers. Okay, so this is actually why there's this symbol called the pentagram. If you look in the old Malian story, because this is where all this stuff comes from, like why Mansa Musa had more gold than anyone in the entire world. And it's because a star fell there, which was a complete, they say it wasn't even a dodecahedron. This is like ancient knowledge. It was like a 5-pointed star, but 3D. And when it fell, it had some kind of level of consciousness with it. And from then on, the people that were the ones who received that star, they became the worshipers of that star. And this is like the foundation of most of the occult systems throughout the world, is that star, that actual meteorite that had some level of intelligence and sentience, becoming the pioneer to most let's say occult organizations that exist today. And this is why they roll it under Venus, because Venus is tracing out this 5-pointed star in the sky over an 8-year period. They break it down to phi, because 72 degrees times 5 is 360 degrees, also called a perfect circle. It has a lot to do with the occult and magic and mysticism and witchcraft. This is why a lot of people wear it, and they have this symbol that they don't even know what it really means and where it comes from. I'm sure like you'll probably go through a million YouTube videos and never get one person to ever be able to explain where that pentagram came from and what was its whole purpose. And then let's close the door on it just so we can get to something else. This is why it's called Lucifer. And it's just because it's actually a star that moves with sentience and has brought many under its sway that can't realize that the same geometry that is in that is actually within them. So this is actually the same thing of what we're talking about with worship and things. The same thing that people are worshiping, they have something far more greater going on inside themselves. But again, that concludes the story of why they say, hey, people started wandering after the fallen stars, that there were basically always relics. There were always pieces and other fragments from other projections that landed here after their projections expire. All physical worlds shut down and reboot again. They're Ouroboros. So it basically always gets to its end cycle and it starts over again. We have always had an opportunity to not participate in time. And I'm going to say that again. We have always had the opportunity to not participate in time. And it's because we have a time machine. Now, this time machine, like if you go and you talk physics and you say, okay, so what is the speed of light? They're going to give you an equation. What is the speed of sound? They're going to give you an equation. And we can improve these equations because if I move at the speed of sound, I'm going to cause a sound barrier. So that's going to be like the demarcation, like, okay, you hit the speed of sound. Same thing with the speed of light. When you hit it, something happens. Some people call that activation. Now, the speed of time, when you hit it, something happens. People call that teleportation. So when we want to try to find, well, do we have a time machine running around? Yeah, you're sitting in one, but it's not the physical version. The physical version of us is not a time machine, obviously. It's the one that is one more or however many layers under, which is that one we use called the dream body. Now, this is how we know the dream body can traverse time. Have you ever had this 5-minute dream? Because you know it was 5 minutes because you just dozed off on the couch before an appointment and then had this huge dream. And then they woke you up and you were like, oh, even disorientated. And they were like, you know, Miss whoever, Mr. whoever, it's time for your appointment. You're like, okay. But it was like, man, that was only 5 minutes. How did that much dream take place in 5 minutes? And it's because the dream body is a time machine. Everything I'm telling you about is already known, by the way. This is known in the societies like the Royal Society. Yeah. Those societies already pulled all this data and stored all this data and gone on with it. So that dream body, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Dolores Cannon did a lot of work there too, where she took people who were missing time, and sometimes they only had missed 2 seconds, but they felt that they were off in another, and they were taken by aliens, pulled into other dimensions, all that kind of stuff. So she did a lot of work on that too, but it's all over the place. Absolutely.
Exactly. I mean, and it's logic. We're doing it every night, like basically time lords. So what happens at the end of this one is we just inject ourselves back into the point that we feel like was where we should have made a different decision. This is why regret and those kind of things are so dangerous, especially against fulfillment and happiness. Yeah. And then when we re-inject ourselves back into another aspect of our lives, a lot of times when the person experienced that, they call that deja vu. They're like, man, I've been here before. Because what they've done is they've actually infused themselves at that point with another part of their consciousness. That's why if you take a moment, you'll see that actually certain types of decisions are about to be made right when you're having that deja vu. And it's us trying to tell ourselves, okay, hey, maybe you want to go left instead of right this time. If you're still playing the game of time, basically, it's basically saying, hey, this is where we made a decision that if we had did another decision, then we would have another outcome. But where we've even gotten now is that babies play with time. We don't even have to accept time. See, we have to realize that everything that we put into our consciousness, we still actually have to program it into our consciousness. Like if I say what went on 5,000 years ago, I'm going to have to say that in English. And because English is a program, I'm still going to have to send that program into my mind, and it's going to need to be decrypted so that I can realize it. And that process alone leaves it vulnerable for hacking. And this is why this is why I encourage people to actually only consider your life now, what you can remember. Because you'll find that it'll be very empowering. It's more than enough to get you into the realization of what kind of things you need to do. Because see, what happens is that when a person knows that, okay, well, this is serious, they're not playing around with me, I got to really get myself to another level. Like the only person that's really going to care about what needs to happen for me is me. Yeah. If you can come to that conclusion in like firm, like our elders, like they're not going to be playing around and laughing around with you after you've enslaved their entire species. It's not, they're going to always keep in that mode back in their mind, at least that, hey, I still know what I'm dealing with here. And I think that's a very important part of our process and our maturity, because it's like the difference between a child that can be abused versus a child or a adept that won't allow themselves to be abused, right? Since abuse is taking place. And what I'm saying a lot of this comes from is when we go too far in the past and we live there, or we go too far in the future and we live there, we then aren't present. And when we're not present, this leaves our own consciousness, even the vehicle that we're in, open for something else actually to animate it. And this is why, if you notice that when a person is not paying attention to what's going on, they're very abstract, they're not focusing. Basically, they become an Agent Smith. Anything can happen with that person. And it's just because they're not home. You know how they say it's like lights on, nobody home? Because they're either in the past with some kind of regret, something that even happened that morning, something that happened 2 years ago, or they're in the future with some vision of where they would rather be than the present. But when they do that, they're agreeing not to be in the space that they're in wholeheartedly. And this is why most people can't bring their power here. Do you get it? Because if you agree to be here, then you already start sending the signals to, okay, let's close down those other projections. And you can see those other projections when you're dreaming. If you ever had opportunity to see a mirror in the dream, which is virtually forbidden, Like to find a looking glass in the dream to see that you don't appear as you appear here is a lot of power, because if you could keep doing that through lucid dreaming, you keep every time getting the dream, you go and find a mirror and you see, oh shit, I'm not the Lisa Vunk from Earth Prime. I'm actually Clathu, you know what I mean? Sitting on a whole nother timeline. But serious, it's empowering. And this is why every single thing that a person has is all they actually need. Like when we start adding all of this extra stuff, we go gandering. I call it the W's, because it's a zigzag. And this is what's talked about in the occult. Zigzag zig was actually one of the names of the more darker forces. And what it means is that basically you never actually go directly to what you want. You move in a zigzag pace. And this creates the W's and the M's. Gotcha. What, why, when, where, wonder, the wonderland of the mind, the wilderness. See, all those begin with W for a real reason. And it's because like maze that's inside of the mind is actually what is the person's traversing most of the time. So the old Anunnaki stories, right? Let me show you how to demystify the Anunnaki story. So anyway, the humans were conscribed to the mind to mine the gold. Okay, so what's being said is that we were turned back from the all-knowing state to go into the mines, or the M-I-N-D or M-I-N-E. And when we go into the mine, now we're going to dig for the precious resources. This is where our ideas are. That's why they call it deep thinking. So, and then also creating children, anything we have to do from our depths. And then when we go and get that gold, and remember, it's coming from somewhere, it's coming from us. When we regurgitate it into the reality, we've now bought our gold to them. Until we control the external projection, we would then bring out and let me make this very simple. When you have babies and you bring them out into this matrix, it takes a lot to make sure that fake matrix. It takes a lot to make sure that somehow they don't get off their path in the fake matrix. It's basically guaranteed that the fake matrix is going to take them and do what it wants. And this is because the fake matrix would then be run by that external artificial consciousness known as Anunnaki. I don't like to say these are actual beings sitting somewhere on a ship, even though they may be, but that would be something that got created a lot later. How it initially starts is just based on archetypical principles and concepts, a language that we can use to explain things that are different, that have more facets to them than just A's and B's and C's and D's. This is why ancient language spoke in the language of stars. That's how we created our first languages, was actually a dot to dot with the stars, but it wasn't just a haphazard dot to dot. It was, hey, you notice how every time when the star gets in that position, there's like a lot more of this, but less of that. And this is the rebuilding of the temple. It's just understanding that, hey, you know, there actually is a time and place really for everything. And if we somehow ever got a gigantic astrolabe of when things are going to happen, then maybe we can sail true again. Maybe we can become the sailor again. And what I'm talking about is that when a sailor, which is a cognate of the first being that came here, by the way, when the sailor
not lost at sea, in
shipwreck. So what's happening is when you're
standing on the land,
when you're working on nautics, you need to use the stars to chart where you're going. And if you're good,
nautics and Gnostic, look at that.
I mean, you'll find the connections everywhere. I mean, it gets even deeper. Let me play with the words a little bit here. So when you're this sailor, and the purpose of this is that you never engage your oars. Now, actually, oar is another word for gold. But anyway, you never engage your oars. You only need your own, the force, the current that's moving through everything to propel you to the next space. So basically, you can blow wind in your own sails. So let me explain this. So you basically are a seafarer. You're a time traveler. You move through the flux. And what happens is the flux is actually, when you look in the sky, that actual pattern that we see the stars moving in, all the thick stars, they're basically already. Say that again?
No, question. As in, this is the language. If the original language was from stars, and then a star crashed here, then that's how we get the language of astrology and the precession of the equinox for time and Yeah.
Well, let me explain it very clearly. We brought down the power of the stars. It says that specifically. Language is to bring down the power of the stars to Earth.
Gotcha.
Now, mind you, not everyone knows, very few people actually know what they're saying and doing. And actually, the language it's only half, so you'll only be half magic. There's actually an old kid's book that talks about, that's called Half Magic. And it's about a kid that realized that he's magic, but he has to wish double for everything because he only gets half of it. And every time that he tries to wish. And this is kind of like how most people's projections are, though. They get almost there, or maybe halfway, we'll say that. And then all of a sudden they seem to catch like to where they can't get the rest of the thing going. It's because the dualistic aspect of how we exist until we remove ourselves from judgment is only at best at half of the potential of where it can be. And then what division does is it keeps decreasing that. This is the world of division. So this is why now they'll actually literally say that the humans are actually using 5% now of who they truly really are. And this is because you judge and ye shall be judged. Okay. We are living, newsflash, occult knowledge after Judgment Day.
Yep.
And this is because as long as we keep playing binary programs, we're not binary beings, we're trinary. Binary worlds are basically the 2-eye thing, the 2-leg thing. So this is literally showing you that it's hardwired in the bodies, which is actually a part of Lucifer's creation, an attempt to put 3 with 2, which equals 5. A masculine and a feminine in the same whole physical vessel. And his father, who we would call God. Now, remember, this is just a whole nother Orion saga. That father we call God told Lucifer that if you put 2 and 3 together, it's only going to create conflict. And Lucifer insisted that it would create a perfect creation in the physical world. And thus we get hermaphrodites, where the word herm, which is actually the same word as harm, Herm was the original hunter, Hern, the hunter, who was androgynous, who actually was rebus and contained 2 components, a penis and a vagina. And if we think that that's got to be a myth, well, then why do we have hermaphrodites? Hermaphrodites are the symbol of Lucifer's attempt to actually put a male and a female body together in the same world. Now, I didn't tell you God was the good guy either. Because God would symbolically, who's the Germanic king good, would make his name the English word good, so everyone thinks that he is. But it's not good or bad. I think people could just only drop off at that point. But what I'm saying is that the whole idea of the slaving of the physical creations and getting everything off balance is direct the what we would call angels, gods, and any being that wants to be worshipped. Once humans start realizing what's going on, they're going to have to pack their shit. And it's just because the gig would be up. And it's a simple thing. It's like, okay, you can't send your energy out to anything. It needs to go in. Any meditational practice, any kind of Nigong, Qigong, all that shows you how to merge all of the chakras, which are the archons, press their asses back together in the Dantain, and then allow that let's say, when that fusion, that's what it is.
Yep.
That fusion to create the true harmony, which is a word that actually exists because of the Mount Hermon, which is where they did the pact in the oath of the fallen angels, to put their asses back together and then basically collapse them, allow them to implode on each other. And then what this does is now you don't see greens, reds, yellows. You don't see like that anymore. Actually, an entirely new HUD, which some people would like to say is the beginning phase of the third eye, a new HUD appears in your vision. And now you actually see things. Well, you're no longer taking input. It's like you're just doing output. So this is how those people with that kind of power, they move all other forces. And this is why. Because the other forces, whether it's gold, whether it's trees, whether it's plants, leaves, they're all, because they're part of the matrix, still in some form of division. When you look into their consciousness, because everything has consciousness and sentience, when you look into it, there's still an ID there that it says, well, I'm a tree. So when you come as Master Magus, who already knows the truth, not has read about it or believes in it, but knows the truth, then it all falls down, because it's always been the game of the strongest, most dominant, stable frequency wins, just like in electronics. It will always win. So when you move in with this knowing, not thinking, you're no longer even accessing the minds or the mind to actually then express who you are. That's the key to the riddle. That's how you beat the serpent. Because see, the serpent's knowledge, which was foolishness to the supreme beings, by the way, the serpent's knowledge, not saying anything bad about the serpent. I'm not talking good or bad here. To say the serpents are bad is just like saying every humans are good. It doesn't make any sense. But to understand what's actually happened.
Sevan, what about Kundalini? Are you referring to serpent energy as in Kundalini here as well?
Do you know that when that word Kundalini was taken from a culture that has almost 50 to 60 words, different words that all mean what people would say is Kundalini, but are actually referring to different things. So when we say Kundalini, that's me like saying, so are we talking about Mike? And I'm trying to refer to the entire world, but there's only a certain amount of mics here. But what I'm saying is that the force itself is what I'm talking about, as it exists as a force, one strand primordial DNA. Okay, primes holding all of the memories that we're standing on. They make up the first part of the ziggurat, the black pillar. And meaning that primordial side of ourselves, that first strand of the DNA is reptilian. Now, even if you go into science and biology, actually, when you're trying to work a process of metamorphosis under a microscope to basically create life forms and give them a actual, it's like you create an ecosystem inside of a beaker. You must dope that beaker with certain chromosomes that come from reptilians. So this is why you can actually go into any real art, any real science, and find the connection with this. So so that means that no matter how much the knowledge gets to another level, or if it's true knowledge, you will be able to find the exact same process. So that's how they learned all this knowledge. They knew that, oh shoot, that's why it keeps dying in the beakers, because we need to dope the slide with reptilian chromosomes so it has a foundation. Then the mammalian gene will begin to grow on top of that chromosome because, or that substance, because it has its foundation. So, not to make it ultra technical, what I'm just explaining to people is that the reason why we have this thing going on with the serpents and the birds is because this closes the loop on the ecological and biological strings. So, because serpents are birds. Let me finish. Because serpents are birds. When they go, the scales become feathers. Look at it. The chicken used to be the Tyrannosaurus. That's what people already have figured out, that the closest relative to the chicken or to the Tyrannosaurus is actually the rooster. And if you notice, there's something going on with that rooster, because the rooster is just aggressive. But what I'm saying is that there's thousands of birds and reptiles like that where they've done the entire string to show you, oh, that garden snake actually became the dove. And those feathers eventually turn to scales. And they always have remnants of that always on their bodies. Like, again, the scales on the bird's feet are still there. The actual optical lens that the bird uses is still that of the serpent. So this is why you get this symbol of this flying snake. Because to the ancients, this always meant a completely perfected being, because they had gone all the way to the bottom and came all the way back to the top. And then now they had formed themselves as being complete. Other than that, you get a scenario like what actually exists in the United States. And the United States wants to be the bird. That's why they always show themselves as the eagle, and because they're in the north. But then they are the snake-hatingest MFers ever. If you think about it, they're always like, even the symbol of Mexico. Actually, remember the actual eagle from the US comes from the same thing that's on the Mexican flag, which is the eagle with the serpent in its beak, right? And now in the US, it's like got a ribbon there. They want to keep it encrypted so much because of people becoming more aware that, hey, this is taken from another culture. But it's just because the people in the North have always despised the people of the South. The people of the North have always been bird worshipers in most cases. That's why the Indians had all the feathers on their head and all that. But they still even had reverence for the serpent. But overall, when the culture translated, everyone became bird worshipers. That's why the birds were the bards and the bards were the angels. And that became known as the language of the bards. You see, but that's all North or Norse stuff. But when you go down to the South side, which is like Tamil, like the south side of dark India, we're in Indonesia, Sankyant, You get that these people are basically clearly in touch with some kind of serpent being. Even the South Indians or Persians move their heads like snakes. And you don't even know. They've ever seen the Indians bob their head and you're like, okay, is that like, where does that come from? It's like the baby will do it out of the womb. And it's because, demystify, the totems of every single culture, which any culture you go back to was always clear to show you their totem. Or just saying, hey, these are the animals that were used to actually make up the bodies that we're in. That's it. Just like that. These are the bodies that were used. So you got lion folks, you got snake folks, you got bird folks. And with this whole thing, because it's all a part of that whole matrix game, that's why I say you can't really jump on anybody's side here. You will enter into this conflict because that unique side of you that doesn't make you like what the other species are you can come to odds with that. And this is why God starts to say, well, that's why earth is my footstool. Because basically what's being meant in that text is that because of this conflict that we keep engaging in, energy is generated just like an engine. Every time we come into conflict, good, bad, right, left, every time we do that, we're moving energy left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And what this does is it creates a force. And that force can be harnessed. And that's what the gods are doing. They harness the force of division. That's why every word that actually was a cognate god, like Deus, Dios, all those words mean two. Dice, all those words they all mean two for a reason. And they keep showing you more and more, okay, well, that same die or dice known as Dios is a cube. So it takes you one more step on the adventure. Okay, so who do we know had the cube? Oh, Saturn. Saturn's got a cube or a hexagon right on top of the pole. Oh, yeah, that's because Saturn's real name was Cedar. Like they used to worship the cedar tree, but cedar, S-E-E-D-E-R, means one who seeds. So then when you look at like old pictures of Saturn, it's always got a penis out. And it's like when you look at Egyptian god men and all these different gods that were all in the whole Saturnalian structure. But again, Saturnalian just means solar. That's why Saturn was the actual previous sun. So this is just the solar atomic cults. And then when you talk about that, like if you go into a weapons facility and start talking about solar and atomic, you're at home because they're like, oh yeah, basically we have all this power and we've mastered all these energies. Like if you see right now what the Hadron Collider can do, the Hadron Collider is breaking the laws of thermodynamics. The laws of thermodynamics are basically however much energy is put in, however much energy comes out, that at least that amount of energy must go in. This is what breaks the whole concept that there's perpetual energy, right? It's already been broken. They smash a particle together and the particle produced more energy than it took to drive the particle down the ring. So what this just means for people that are not tech heads is that the ability to break all of the ideas of time, all of the rules of how things work in this structure has already now become available, that basically the entire realm and how it's designed, the real matrix, has been nullified. And this is all going on, and this is all going on right under everyone's eyes. And this is why, see, when we wake up into this matrix, we automatically assume, because of our affinity for nature, which is kind of like an affinity for our mother, we automatically assume that this is perfect, that nature is perfect. If nature was perfect, nothing would die. So we need to understand, well, what does perfect mean? Like everyone has a different definition for perfect. So when we look deep into the geometry, because you can do this with even less than the electron microscope, you can take a spore of pollen and go underneath and look at it, and you'll see there's a pattern there. Now they call that pattern a meta. Like, so this is in science. Meta is a science word meaning unexplainable. So they actually even still use this word. They call it meta because for a while they didn't know what this pattern even does. It had no function to them. Now their science has brought them to the word metamaterial because they figured out that actually what that pattern was is how everything is communicating with its own species with infinite bandwidth. This means that a bandwidth, like our internet right now, is at a certain bandwidth. So if I have a high bandwidth, but you have a low bandwidth, and I call you, it doesn't matter how high my bandwidth is, we're still going to have problems with connecting. Especially if I try to turn on the video, we're going to have problems with connecting. So what's happened to most humans is their meta material pattern, which would be metaphysics, is actually the actual pattern itself is not perfected anymore. Okay. And this could be for a plethora of reasons. It could be because of Wi-Fi. It's fixable, but we would at least need to know what's going on, because knowing is the half of the battle, according to G.I. Joe. So what happens is that in that meta material, what they found out in their studies was the things that were offline in pollen created the decay cycle. Okay, this is a word. The decay cycle is basically how fast does something live and die. So what is the decay cycle of a worm? What is the decay cycle of a human? Why is there a higher decay cycle in something like a turtle? And it's because when you go into their metamaterial, you find that their pattern is more perfect. So this is what they did. They created fully perfect patterns. And now they have external versions of completely perfected metamaterial patterns. And what they're used for right now is cloaking. It's used right now on all advanced aircraft that the US has a metamaterial coating that doesn't allow it even at all to be detected by any kind of radio. And this is because the principles of metamaterial are primarily, they bend light in the opposite direction. That's all I'll explain about this right now. There's many different properties of metamaterials and things that can be done, but just to understand, well, why can it even do that? Is it bends light in another direction. Go ahead.
Gotcha. No, I was going to say, so we don't even need genetic engineering anymore, because the metamaterial is what actually gives the DNA its pattern. Correct?
It always has. It always has.
Yes.
And the only thing that's going on right now is our patterns have become distorted, because the same wavelength that most of these patterns continuously form themselves on are like the same ones that the radio stations are coming down. See, that's why we created the Fiocco water programming device, which is coming out probably about 3 to 4 months, will be in beta. And it's because when I was uncovering all this knowledge, I was going through cymatics. I was going through all these things. Now, here's another thing. Here's proof, because people are like, this sounds, I don't know how to take this. Well, let me prove it to you. Elon Musk. Okay, now Elon's different. Elon probably is an alien, or at least is infected by one, for better or for worse. Notice the profile here. You have a person that basically is saying things that need to be changed in the future that actually would be paramount to things that we would need to do. But the old oligarchical juggernaut would probably roll in its grave if it found out that such things would be implemented. But somehow this guy is allowed to implement them. What am I talking about? Well, actually, Elon Musk is almost responsible for taking Hawaii into being completely sustainable. Hawaii, with solar energy, Hawaii was fully dependent on oil that actually had to be shipped to Hawaii because they don't produce their own oil. So Hawaii has been a cash cow for the elites for quite a bit of time. How does Elon get in there and all of a sudden upset the cash flow? Okay, that's one thing. Elon also went into Australia after the blackout, in which they didn't even know why it was being caused, and said, hey, you know what? I can fix the blackout for you within a year. And if I don't fix it, you can have all the equipment for free. And he did it. He actually brought in all those batteries that he has and all those different things that he's basically took him from Tesla and he's made working systems, and it's there. So now he's working on this Hyperloop or whatever, which is supposed to solve the traffic problems. But what I'm saying is, this is not the guy like Steve Jobs, who took the death certificate of the Illuminati program, which is not wanting to be bothered by regular people anymore and just faking like you're dead. It's not like you're going to find Steve Jobs in the mall anyway. Bill Gates, these kind of people, they had all these visionary ideas that they never implemented. And it wasn't like they didn't have the cash. So why is Elon able to implement and do things that nobody else is able to do? Oh, well, because there has to be some kind of agreement going on. Nothing goes on without an agreement. So what could that agreement look like? Well, look at Elon's latest project, Neuralink. Okay. According to Elon, within 10 years, we're going to have a Terminator situation based on AI and deep thinking from Google and Facebook, which is basically Facebook, who has the permissions, look in their clause, to take every single thing that you're talking about, how you respond, how you talk to others, and throw all that in computers that actually have custom programs written to start to understand how you function and how everyone functions. And it's not to just watch people all day. I mean, after all, what would there be to watch? I mean, people are mostly not engaged in anything beside what their whole cycles are generally stuck into right now, right? So what are they doing? They are attempting to make the computer sentient, the last stage, to give it reason, because that's the only thing that makes us more powerful than computers. They can move faster, they can think faster, they can do all that, but they can't reason. So they need deep thinking AI to basically create this huge database of probabilities that are so accurate, it would be even better than us in reason. You see what I mean? Because at least, like, sometimes we reason, if you think about it, we reason that we shouldn't be doing something, but we go and do it. So it's like with a computer, you don't get that issue. It's not going to go and do what it's reasoned that wouldn't work. So this would create a problem. And there's literally a meeting about this. This would create a problem that within 10 years, these damn computers would be more smarter than humans. And then what we'd be dealing with. So they have doomsday scenarios, and then they have best case scenarios. So what Elon has decided is forget the doomsday scenarios and the best case scenarios. Let's stay at the level of computers. And this is how it all happened. It's already happened, by the way. You can go to Neuralink.com. Elon insists that we're already augmenting, meaning that when you need to know the answer to something and you don't, what do? Google. So this process is called augmenting. So just people understand what that word means. It means to use something else to support you or to give you something that you did not have. Mm-hmm. So since we're augmenting already, according to Elon, then why don't we go the rest of the way? And the rest of the way is his idea for Neuralink. Neuralink is basically a very thin fiber optic, possibly, or actually a metamaterial thread that is injected into the brain. And then what it does is it forms itself around the brain and basically really snug. And then from there, anything that you need to know, you just augment right away. Like the same thing you see in the Matrix. So it's basically, if I need to know how to fly a plane, literally, I augment as a signal in my brain to Neuralink. Neuralink pulls all that data and actually loads it into the proper parts of the brain that would make you feel like you knew how to actually drive that plane, right? Mm-hmm. So if you go to the Neuralink site, because he's hiring for this, and this is how you would know, because I came across metamaterials about 4 years ago before Neuralink was even an idea. And this is how you, well, not an idea that was public. And this is how you know that there's a constant stream of consciousness that anyone can tap into. It doesn't exclude whether you're good or bad. It actually just says, are you in that mode or in that zone? And somehow Elon is actually in that same mode and zone. Because 4 years ago, I was studying metamaterials, probably right around the time that he started realizing that if you wanted to interface with a biological organism to complete bandwidth. And the only reason I keep saying that is because understand that most stuff that we use has a very low bandwidth, so we only can do so much with it. Even our higher selves, there's a disconnection between us and our higher selves because our higher self is in a perfect metamaterial shape, if you want me to explain it to you. And then ours is slightly off. Well, maybe a little more than slightly. And then what this does is we don't have a complete, right, exactly. We don't have that complete input, output, unlimited. We have that, it's been filtered. And this is honestly what people need to know the most about this is that when your pattern is disturbed, your metamaterial, your geometric lattice work that surrounds your field, when it's messed up, you can't communicate with your other self. And this is like not being able to communicate with the ship and you've already beamed down. It's like, ship, are you there?
Oh no.
They want to hear me. It's hostile down here. Are y'all there? Okay, let me get to higher ground. Let me get to that top of that mountain. Hello, are you?
Danger, Will Robinson.
Exactly. And then pretty soon what starts is the amnesia, right? So, you know, I know we kind of did, you know, we went around the world just then. And that was a good intro. Like we're about an hour in. And I think that, you know, it just gives people maybe a little bit more of an idea of the range that we're talking about here. But more of what I want to express to people is that when I discovered this, I didn't just hold it like data. I went into development. Now, this is what I figured out, though, that I had to land now. Because all that knowledge is like, that's some real astro kind of stuff going on, right? Yeah. But what applications does any of that, what I just said, have in the physical reality? Since we can't even manufacture, Meaning that to me, the key to this entire thing with the conscious community is until we can actually employ conscious people, because we have created facilities that are manufacturing conscious products, whether it be apps, whether it be devices, whether it be whatever, because everyone seems to have a great idea when they put their mind to it or have the opportunity to put their mind to it. That's how we would get off to the next level, the same way the Jews did, that they actually only shop with each other. And that's what makes them so financially powerful. So if just like they would say, well, I want to boycott Nike, but the next alternative for conscious shoes is not even there. So this is because many of the people that have actually conceived the higher level, the Arabot, the purple of the whole thing and the indigo of the whole thing, I still now have the problem of needing to go back down the escalator again to the moss floor, which is Malkuth, the root chakra, and it's like, well, why would I want to go back there? And this is what we've been doing, is like it says in the scripture, behold, I saw the ladder going up and down. So I'll go back down the ladder, come back into the physical reality, and say, you know what? We need to build a bridge here. We need the basics, because while we're talking about all this tasty organic food and all this shit's expensive, like when you go to the store, it's like, oh, well, I guess I have to eat GMO. And I had a guy that was talking about the other day. He was like, you know, I'm not even in any position to really even get off GMOs for a month and a half. So I don't even from now. And so I don't even think meditation or anything is going to do anything for me. So this is actually what happens in the person's consciousness when they listen to, you know, the most popular spiritual speakers that are out now, because it's easy to express to a person what they need to do, but giving them the ability to do it has always been like the part where everyone is just missing on. So I would sit back all the time and just kind of watch that, because I started 4 or 5 very successful businesses when I was doing my thing. And so what this means is I know what works and what doesn't work and why it works and why it doesn't work. I went through all those trials. And so when I look back at the conscious community, I say, well, still, everyone's got their hand out. It's like, donate to me, send it to me. You give me something, right? But we need to be giving. And because there's only going to be a certain group of people anyway that can actually do that. And actually the way those people take in information is generally like entertainment, because they have the luxury to sit down for hours and listen to some of this stuff, while anyone who's in the real world is like, yo, I got to go to work. So to give people the opportunity,
a whole lot of bullshit. That's what they think.
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, they're living in a real world where the lights are going to get cut off if they don't do what they need to do, and they hear about this next level, but there's no transition. Yeah, that's understandable. That's kind of how that's kind of how. Right. They want to self-substantiate.
Sorry, Sevan, shut up. Go,
I'm saying what you're saying. They want us to self-substantiate. They want to be sovereign. Yeah. Because see, the thing is that to me, like, I started breaking it down like this. Like, I don't have to throw electricity through my hands like a Sith Lord to prove that I have some level of power. Power is, can I cut my lights on? Power is that my water? Is that my well? That's power. Because when you look at Masonic books, like the old ones, when they show you who's involved, they own all the railroads, they own all the power companies, they own the infrastructure. Yep. So, and this is what keeps everyone from becoming a true sovereign. So as above, so below. If you're not a sovereign here, you're definitely not a sovereign up there. You probably got some God and some bankers and some brokers and some Merovingians and even some Knights Templar managing your soul contract. And then you're probably doing it willingly too. You probably agreed and put your oath, place your right hand over your heart and pledged allegiance to it too. You know, pledge allegiance to 51 upside down pentagrams and see how that goes for you in the future. So this is a real thing, this sovereignty. So I said, let's take it back then. Because, you know, there's stuff you'll have to endure. So if you don't have this focal point or this focus on something that keeps you saying like, okay, the only reason why I'm experiencing this right now is because I'm trying to get to that, then you never get there. Sovereignty is the key, because every time I experience something from this reality that I don't like, it only empowers me, because right then I say, you know what, you see right there, that is exactly why you should be sovereign. And if you want to blame it on somebody else, remember, you spent like 5 years in the club trying to get those girls. So think about like all your time that was wasted. Now you better catch up. So meaning that there's always something you can tell yourself similar to that. Like, you see, the reason why you're dealing with that person who keeps getting on your nerves is because you're not sovereign yet. And instead of blaming it on that person, blame it on yourself because you spent so much time not working towards a specific goal. But now you have it. The sovereign is that way, or sovereign, because that first part of the word is what? Soul. Okay, the sun. And it's because as the prime mover, you should always be on the tip of the projection. This is actually where we generally reside. This is where the all-knowing is. I talked about this in my last interview. It's at the tip of the projection. And you can see this as, see, that was Nassim Harriman that drew out the diagram, or Marco Rodin drew out the diagram of how the solar system is really moving, how the sun is basically spiraling. And then all the celestial bodies are actually following that or in its wake. Okay. And you know that's true because if you ever like blast open your third eye with some DMT on the beach and you look at it, you'll see everything's actually spiraling around the sun, including the clouds. It's not how we normally see it. So what this is talking about is that, see, when you don't have any possessions, which hold you back, when you don't have time, like when you want to enter into that forever young stage, there's no sunset for the sun, by the way. Some people think the sunset doesn't have a sun. The sun doesn't have a sunset, okay? So to enter into that forever young, never having a sunset, never being possessed, never being held, never going into low densities, you must focus back onto the point, which is in the physical reality, sovereignty, on the spiritual reality being at the tip of the sun. Because when you're at the tip, you're experiencing things as they come. That's what they call being in the moment. And the energy associated with that is so high. That's really what happens. You know, see how a person acts when they're just in the moment? It doesn't even matter what's going on. Once they get in the moment, and like they party and oh yeah, they in the moment, it's like they let go. And then they're no longer thinking that she belongs to me and all that. Because if they're doing that, they're not in the moment. They're not, if they're thinking, ma'am, I got to go back to work tomorrow. Well, they're not in the moment. They're actually in the future thinking about tomorrow and work. So they're not at the peak of their own consciousness. So they can't manage their own sovereign vehicle. So this is what they've done, because we can be in more than one place at one time. It's been proven now. So then what happens is you reflect. Okay, this is a very important word, because that's actually how the entire matrix is constructed, is based on reflections. It's like a whole mirror-based holographic system, okay? Pointing lasers and lights and letting them concentrate into dense corners. So what happens is that when you reflect, you look back. That's like Lot's wife. So what happens is that when you look back, you're basically saying, man, what about grandma? Or I remember that time. And I'm not saying anything is right or wrong with this. People need to understand, get rid of the right and wrong. But when you do that, you immediately come from prime right into the projection. You insert yourself into that memory. And because I remember when you were in the moment, it doesn't break up as mother. It doesn't break up as all of that. It actually is just a large feeling of energy that feels great. So it doesn't try to define in the moment. There's no definition, but in the reflection, there's all the definitions. And this is how it works. Like a person would literally be like, yeah, because when I was at the party, man, we started taking these substances and Julie was there and that my favorite band came on. So see, what they're doing now is they're densifying it. They're like now trying to put like components to the feeling, right? But again, what that would be then, let's say, so here's the visualization. You got the sun moving, and that's you. You're on the tip, cosmic surfer. And then that exhaust coming out the back, which is the rest of the projection after you've experienced it, that's called stardust, AKA planets. That's once it's congealed, once it's slowed down, once it's formed, that's what that is. So we can go back and live in that. And we have to remember that when you do that, though, you remove your prime self. The higher self is always going to be able to drive the tip of the sun. It's on autopilot. This is what we call instinct. This is the knowing. Like, we don't need to be trained how to drive our maximum state of consciousness. It's always doing that. We can get back there and jump back into the cockpit. Or we can go back into the future's life. So this would be like putting your ship on autopilot and then going back into the cabin area and then booting up the old holodeck and then sitting into that whole experience and then forget you're even in the holodeck after a while when you're starting to process all these experiences. And this is why I was saying regret then becomes your harbinger or nemesis. Because what starts to happen is as looking at these dense projections, you would have been like, I wonder what would have happened if I was like Greek during that time. I wonder what happened if I had told her no. I wonder what would happen if I actually saved that dog that day. So this is actually regret. So what happens is, because it's all a projector or projection, when the person dies, they see this just like a projector. We have a projector because that's how we see the dreams. We have a light projector built in our head. So when a person, detethers from this current physical weight, then they start seeing that entire projection, but mainly the high points. See, the high points, like if you were looking at an EKG meter, it's like when it spikes. And these are the parts of like when you met that person that you fell in love with, when you had that car accident. All those things actually stand out more than the other signatures and experiences. So at the end of life, you see only the spikes, basically only what's important. And that's why people say, or what was important to you? My life flashed before my eyes. It wasn't the whole thing. It was all the spikes. And then what a person then does right then is they dive in. Okay, not literally. They dive back into this light like a womb. And what this does is, and this is why trinary, when you're in the binary world, it's so hard to explain this, but what happens is the person then becomes more conscious at that moment. This is what we call it. This is why when you watch a baby, the baby starts in this first process where it just basically looks, I don't know, like it's not there. And then as it starts getting a little bit older and a little bit older, you can start seeing there's actually some kind of presence happening where it starts to become more aware of itself. That's not just because the faculties are developing for the baby. That's because that line of light that has been opening up, that is transferring that spirit into that body again, is streaming it. Just like we're streaming YouTube right now, it's beginning to stream it into that new body. And the easiest way to explain this is you are a signal. You're not the body. You're a signal. The body is like the TV. The signal is like the channel. So just because the TV goes bad, it doesn't mean that if we go get another TV and turn it back on, that we're not going to see the same signal start again. And that's just what it is. We will reboot once we get another TV set to carry the signal. Or you can move back into your space of all knowing. Last thing here. Remember that now, of course, I've said some stuff that's a lot easier said than done. And the reason is because where we're actually at is the universe, which is like a university. Okay, so it gives a bunch of tests. The moment that you say that you've actually accomplished something, the only thing it says is, okay, well, let's test them. Because in the word universe, it shows you it right there. Uni, which means united, verse, which means in conflict. Okay? Unique is another word. Universe is a word. So the uni on front of the universe means united, but verse means in conflict, as in me versus you. So that means we need to understand what we are doing when we accept to be in a universe, basically an entire place that deems its existence based on contrasts. The word could have easily been the unify. We should have been calling it that. Oh, I'm living in the unify. Because when you're living in the unify, that word literally says that all 5 base organisms will be together. When you're living in the universe, so it's just as simple as saying, if I gave it to you in binary code, universe would be 1, 2. Unify would be 1, 3. And this is literally how the entire reality then converts itself just to numbers. And then those numbers then convert themselves to tones and geometric patterns. And that's the code to the matrix. So I just want to, again, this final thing is to realize that because that whole universe aspect exists and that there's that conflict that we have going on that proves our existence, like it needs to be proven, what happens is the final test is really, are you not judging? Okay? And so I'm going to give you some secrets here. The first thing is that in this process, you will be approached by none other than the king of the Draconians itself, God, who actually appears more serpentine than anything and carries a reaver or a wreath to try to cut one from the previous cycle to the other. And that's why most people don't remember. Okay. But let me just explain what this is because it's symbolic. You'll be approached with something like this. Well, if you created all of this and all this is a part of your projection, then why don't you know anything about it? And then what will be flashed to you is basically everything you don't know. All the stuff like they were talking about in school, and even stuff they were talking about in metaphysics that you never took the time to actually learn. You'll be questioned that if this is all yours, how could it all be yours if you don't even know like that stuff? And this is where most people are turned back. They're turned back because then they'll go into actually probably obeisance and say, you know what, you're right, God. If it was mine, then I would know about it. And they will humble themselves. Okay. This is the difference between a servant and a sovereign. See, it's a very thin line, but you got to understand, Freemasons are servants. They come to serve the God who is their king. And in that king, they trust. See, when I approach the throne, I don't approach as a servant. I'm basically, where's my stuff? Like, this is my allotment. When my eyes close, yours don't. So this belongs to me here. So this is the mode of the mindset. But here's how do you break that last riddle of the serpent? Basically trying to make you believe that it takes knowing, as it uses the words, which is really more of a belief. It takes knowing everything in order to graduate from the projection. We already know. This whole knowledge stuff, like this is knowledge stuff, is actually based on numbers, which can be numbing. How long did the person live? How many degrees did they have? How much money do they have? And all that is actually equated by more numbers. Like if they have $1 million with all these zeros behind it, this means that something somehow became more powerful. And that's the trick, is to make a person subconsciously believe that the more they become divided, the more powerful they will become. And every single thing in the world is set up like that. The more you have of something, that the more powerful you'll be. But that is actually not true. It's honestly the person that just has with them what they need is the most powerful, because they're never depending on anything to determine whether they're going to do what they need to do next. They're completely self-contained, i.e. sovereign. So this is what happens. We figured out that was the whole serpent's bag. That first of all, with the one strand DNA, that it really couldn't see at least the reflection of itself to start bouncing ideas off. See, we're on two strand. Two strand is still better because it's like allows you to bounce ideas off. So then you get triplicity. This is also mentioned in the Kabbalah, that basically the monad duplicated itself, and then it became the shadow known as Shaddai, and then it was able to, so they go through all of that, all the pomp and circumstance. But what's basically being said is mitosis, the process how you come into total awareness. However, getting stuck in binary isn't going to work either. So the one strand DNA thinks that it knows everything. The one strand DNA actually thinks that, it literally thinks, also a cognitive thought or thought, that all of this knowledge in books, that's why the Thoth was the scribe. He was an ibis by day, but he was another powerful serpent by night. And that's when you know how to decode the literature. If you ever see a bird, know you're also looking at a snake. So you need to see, well, what was his snake? What was Thoth's snake side? Well, Thoth's snake side was the one that was that whole apple, that bitten apple, which had to do with the serpent. So let me demystify the words. Serpent. Okay, pent in the back is the pentagram, meaning 5. Pent means 5. Sir is also a word like we use, hey, hello, sir. Good day, sir. We're saying good day, snake. Sir, sar, sor, or sor, as in sorcerer, all has to do with the worshiping of snake energy or current, okay, or the use of it. I'm not saying anything is bad or good here. Let's just understand what these words mean to demystify the entire thing. So the serpent's knowledge, because serpents have always been related to trees. In fact, if you get high enough, you'll see that many of the trees are very serpentine. It gets weird because that's where the bridge is. Insects to trees to insects to reptiles. Because you see insects that look like trees, right? Like the old stick bug, old leaf bug, right?
Yeah, those ones in Costa Rica, stick bugs are crazy.
Exactly. So, but what I'm saying is that's the real matrix. It's smeared life. So it starts all the way, and I'm just showing you one of the parts of the ladder is from trees to insects, then to serpents. Okay, just to give you a little bit more about what's in the basement when you keep going down a few floors. That's why anytime you have netherworld dreams, there's a lot of insects and weird kind of beetles and that kind of stuff running around the dream, because you're in the netherworld. Because these are the primordial. This is the primordial aspect of self. So what happens is, again, is just to explain it, that the serpent, who was more cunning than any of the beasts in the field, because it had been in the matrix longer, that it had accumulated quite a bit of knowledge about the matrix, mainly phi and the pentagram. And this is because everything is developed off that geometric pattern here. Then the serpent thought that it had achieved some high level of wisdom. And then God was like, that actually is foolishness, what you know. And it's because none of this stuff you will need when you leave here. It's just like what they teach you in college or their fake universities. None of that stuff you're going to need when it's time to go to work. You got all that trigonometry. You're never going to need it. Exactly. And that's exactly.
God damn it. But it's just, like I'm trying to get in and go, this like everything is just literally a smokescreen to the reality of what we've got to get on with. Like it's just constant, isn't it?
That's what creates time. It's a holdup. And see, listen, let me demystify it even more for you. Let me get it.
We're like on a fucking like a Western, and they're coming up with guns, and they're like, right, everyone.
Well, listen, Western,
a
Western, look how it all connects. Western is a Saturnalian motif. The black hat that they wear, like the hat that they wear is concatenated the same hat that the Jews wear in Orthodox Judaism, which is basically a Hyksos tradition. Remember, the Hyksos kings were the last ones to rule in Egypt. They took that whole Saturnalian knowledge about splitting the atom. They put this black cap on with the rim around it, which is the rings of Saturn. And then they start playing around with these numbers, which is their whole banking and Kabbalistic thing. And then they became worshipers of Saturn, whose metal is lead. And that same lead is what they load up their guns with in Westerns to blow holes in every single person in the reality that's not doing what they want to do. I mean, and look, you couldn't stretch this enough. It would be impossible. But see, it's because it's alchemical. So some people say, are they aware of this? Well, see, that's what I was saying about when you're not home. When you're not home, there's a collective hive energy, which are egregors and eidolons, that can inhabit your vessel, and whatever is like resonating around you, like if you just have like a whole cabinet full of Western flicks, because that's what you like, and they're all sitting on those DVD flying saucers with all that magnetic energy being thrown off of them, then you have a direct resonator to actually the Saturnalian energy right there. You see what I mean? And I'm not saying any of this is good or bad. I'm just saying when we understand resonance, then we can say, well, if I want something, then that means all I need to do is put as many objects around me that resonate that energy. Well, that's called magic. That's actually called ritual and rites. That's putting everything around you that's based on that. And so that's, how the seafarer, the one who knows how to sail their galactic ocean, moves in this matrix. And so, amazing trip. And I always think about this because I know quite a bit and I've experienced even more. This is an adventure. EMR? Like I can literally say that again.
What was EMR? You said you've experienced EMR. What's EMR?
Oh, no. I was saying I've experienced even more. So basically I've experienced more than I know. That's what I'm saying. And what I'm saying also is that this is an adventure. Once you get to this stage of awareness, it doesn't become now, because there's this point though, there's a lot of points actually like this where it's overwhelming. Overwhelmingly tends to like, when you're looking at where everyone else is and then where you are, this becomes difficult to deal with and cope with daily. However, you start realizing that that's actually a part of the whole process, is that for you to become the sovereign, you actually become similar to the same thing that the sun became for this reality. You become for a while for those life forms or people that are still growing up, because all plants grow up. You become that light source for them that they need to condense for a while, because everything here is just condensing light, right? All tree trunks and barks really are condensed light. That's why DMT is so powerful, because in the acacia tree, acacia trees grow in the desert. That's like the only tree you'll see in the desert is acacia. So it's taking all of that sunlight and it's condensing it into its root bark. And then here you come and you may smoke that, and next thing you know, you get that moment of pure awareness for that moment, because now you have basically eaten light. So you're now fueling your vessel on light. And this is why a part of this conversation was going to be about the whole diet thing, for us to realize that there's other ways to hack this matrix. If you figured out that, you know what, I kind of even understand everything that you're talking about, but I'm having a hard time getting off the ground. I mean, I've tried it, it's my family, is this, and there's always a list of things that the person has that they want to blame. Here's how you do it. Get rid of the most dense things, at least for right now. This will literally be like you're flying around in this ship. It needed to be repaired long ago, but because you can't repair something and fly it at the same time, this is the state that you're actually in. And now what needs to happen is it's like trying to fly and repair a ship at the same time. Hey, you know, get that thing in a tailspin. It's not going to go well. So most people just fly like in their ship should have been back at the dock a long time ago, but they can't land it. Right? It's like, I can't stop. I can't take a break. I got to go to work. I got to get the kids. And then this basically becomes where they get ragged down. Right? And then the energetic potential enters into the negs. See, because we don't realize that because there's no beginning, there's no end, there's no time. This means that there actually is no real low state. So you can keep going further and further and further. And this is why a lot of people, when they come to their awakening, they think that they're supposed to experience a glory, greatness right away. And it's like, no, you just got to -4. And now you're at -3. Okay, now you're back at 0. Okay, now you need +1 before you start seeing the rewards to this. So let's, get on with this already. So I would definitely say that, again, with the person's energetic center, they have to realize if they're looking for a really big boost all of a sudden, drop something out of the cargo hangar. It's the same thing in that if we're on a ship and this is the seas are too rough and we even got a hole, what am I going to give out as a captain first? I'm going to say, yo, empty the cargo. And they're going to say, but captain, that's all of our food. And I'll be like, but if we die, we won't be able to eat.
Yeah.
Anyway, empty it all out. And to me, this is like sometimes things like meat. This is sometimes things like the club. This is sometimes, and anyone, I'm not judging anyone. So anyone can do this for their own selves. You basically pick meat. Meat actually plays a big role in this if you want to just get the immediate boost. I'm not just saying, hey, go be a vegetarian. I'm saying, hey, give yourself a shot here. Because if you need to get a quick boost and you drop meat out the hangar, then you probably will have enough energetic potential to boost you to that next part of catching up to your synchronicity. Because see, the only thing that's happening here is that every time you come around, this is your higher self, that solar prime mover. Every time you come around, you miss the bus to you. Yeah, you get in the way of yourself. And what I mean by you miss the bus is that, see, everything is on orbits in the physical reality. The time between your birth and death is your orbit. Okay. So since that orbit is like a bus, and this is why you can have people in your orbit. You know, it's like there's some people that you even see all the time. They don't even know that you keep seeing them. You're like, there go that person again. It's because they're in your orbit. So what happens is that in this whole process, you can literally decide, okay, you know what? When I come back around again, and this is why I was saying, that's why it's powerful to have a very clear mind, because a lot of times we miss the bus. It'd be like time for us to go in somewhere. And this is always why division becomes such a counterproductive thing, is because in that time that it takes us to think is how long it takes for us to miss the bus sometimes. Yeah, because like when we're like, should I? And so when you when you start training yourself, and this is basically deprogramming, because you used to always work like this. When you start deprogramming yourself from just having judgments at all, and like just moving through that, it starts hacking that whole process. So what I'm saying is that just with anything, when you notice yourself having to go through that left, right, up, down, do I like her, do I don't like her, all that kind of thing, or more than anything for conscious people, when you're looking at somebody that's really acting out like the Illuminati, or you're reading some kind of book that tells you that basically who's responsible for all this and whose fault it is, and then you're like getting into that whole thing like, yeah, you see, they destroyed our reality, I'm gonna drop a one waffle on them too, but it's gonna be an internal one that I'm gonna do in my meditation, and then I'm gonna hem them all up into an organic grid that I'm gonna create from all my chakras, and then I'm gonna project inside of them perfect geometry and metamaterials. Now that may work, but what I'm saying is just the whole way of processing that, you could just get on with it already instead of, and this is what I'm trying to explain to people, what judgment actually is not just the thoughts and the words, but just a waste of time, because at the end of the day, that's actually the only valuable thing here. And if we can already accept, I already know what's going on. If I spend an hour talking to someone about how the system is screwed with this new presidency, I mean, what did I say that is not really known? But on top of that, did the people that are even involved in that even hear me? No. And at the level that I'm at right now, with, let's say, with some people with $1,000 in the bank account, is there anything that you really can do about this on a massive scale? Like, I'm not saying go change them. I'm saying create an alternative. Because this is why, you know, when you go head to head with a Freemason, the last thing that they'll say to you is this: all right, then, if I get what you're saying about God and about the craft and about all this, but produce one better. And then they'll kind of have you stuck, because it's like, yeah, because we do a lot of complaining about what we would really like it to be. And then we leave it up to the same people who always want it the way that it is to change it. And that's not how it's going to work. And then again, just to understand very clearly, money is an alchemical talisman. Like this, there's much more to that rectangular shaped piece of necromancy than people think. An ode to what a piece of paper can really do. You know, once you understand magic and mysticism, you realize most of it functions in a two-dimensional realm on the top of a piece of paper, and pressing intentions into certain things that vibrate at a certain frequency. And that's what a dollar is. It's actually necromancy. That's why there's always a dead president. There's always a two-dimensional signature of that president. There's always the energetic potential, which is the magnetic strip. There is always the lattice work, which is called the, oh man, this word is a little bit, man, it just basically means that kind of geometry that you see that they write the edges with that looks like webs. That's a specific kind of geometry. And then last but not least, it's called say it again.
Sacred or fractal geometry.
No, in this case, it's not even, it looks like ribbons. Like if you look like at a dollar bill, and then you see they draw this kind of, these shapes around it, and it all looks like just lines. It's like lines, and they're moving in waves. And I'll get the name but it's basically, it's a specific kind of.
I know what it is you're talking about, because to add to your
galoosh or something like this. Go ahead.
No, but you're talking about food and vibration and what you put in, and what actually awakened my Kundalini. I mean, I didn't eat any LSD or smoke any acacia tree or any of that. I actually was sun gazed for a long time, and eventually I had a samadhi, and then boom. But that whole experience is just like, as you said, so overwhelming that in order to come back down, I actually had to eat meat to be able to stand up and walk around the freaking house. Seven.
Right, right, exactly. And this just proves the principles more, that there are grounding agents that are often needed at times when you get too high. And then there are, you know, when you're just too grounded, you're in the vortex, and you have to drop grounding agents in order to be able to jettison out of the vortex.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, and then in conclusion, just to wrap that up for people to understand that, again, like I was saying earlier, if you just take your life, you'll realize that also, while this can be fun, it's not a game. And what I mean by that is that this is still your soul. This is still your life. And so you have to realize that some of the actions that have already taken place in this matrix by some of the controllers of the matrix, if you may, fake matrix controllers, that those things are direct insults to who we are as beings. So there's no reason to trust, is what I'm saying. There's no reason to play. There's no reason to act like that, you know, it's all okay. Because when that happens, that actually is the deepest levels of mind control. That's like Stockholm syndrome, right? So what I would encourage people to realize is, again, that this is still something very serious, that we have to actually get ourselves to this higher ground in order to remove ourselves from that false matrix that is trying to exact some kind of control over us, mold, shape, and fashion us, and keep us in binary, literally like computers, just so that we can just do input, output all day. When we work, we get income instead of outcome. So all of the whole system is just designed for us to keep feeding into the system until we're exhausted.
Yep.
Overspent. No, well, you just described the last 7 years of my life entirely, being alleviated of everything I own. And actually, Brett was joking before, when I left Bali to come. I literally am living out of a suitcase. I only have my ticket, my time here, and I haven't even booked the next place I'm going. I'm following source, and I'm going where the universe is bringing me, and traveling all over. And I'm sovereign about the system. Actually, our last radio show was on how to access your birth certificate trust before Heather ended up getting arrested. But the whole thing, you know, sovereign, I left, I don't know if I ever said it in any of our prior interviews, Sevan, but I left the US after I started my radio show, and I was just so sick of being in the police states. I knew I had to go find my tribe and follow my heart, and it led me around the world. I've been in Bali for a while, but now it's time to go on and travel for a little bit. I don't know what I want to do, but I feel so free. But Brett was joking because there's always stuff with my luggage. It either doesn't show up or it gets lost.
The baggage. You can't bring your baggage.
I keep telling her, just fucking don't take it. Just forget about it. Don't pack a bag.
Yeah. Then I had the idea the other night when we were talking about doing this show. I said, well, you know, I want this new live format. I used to have Random Acts of Love and Kindness where I had a fund for people to donate to people who were doing good things in the world and needed some resources. But I said, well, how about this idea? It's Random Acts of Love and Kindness now. Instead of doing what I did before with the raising money for like CBD oil or filing UCCs or whatever, I said, wherever I end up, whenever I have to go to the next place, we'll have a caller be able to call in, and then they get all the stuff I've collected because I just can't take it. And I'm modeling letting go.
Hey, take all the stuff I brought.
I needed while I had it.
I've just bought it for you anyway.
Can I ask you one question? It goes way back to the beginning. It was when you said, just let me finish. But then I, of course, had 10 more questions. But we could do this for probably a week straight, and I still would have a list of questions.
Yeah, well, we got 20 minutes, so we can go into questions now. I'll do them like flash questions. I'll go fast.
Okay. You were specifically talking about the reptilian. You know, I went to school for genetic engineering. So you were talking about the reptilian DNA being the first one, and then the mammalian being the second. And you were also having talked about how, you know, all of manifestation or creation is manifested from sound or cymatics or, you know, some kind of Mandelbrot or numbers or a light, various different ways it shows up. So if that's the two spirals, what's the third one that goes on top of that in the next sequence? And thirdly, is that have to involve why is this meta material have something to do with the cloaking of that third, as well as why when we are incarnate in this human spaceship as a baby, we have that forgetting? Is that part of this whole matrix thing with that metamaterial?
Well, let me explain what it is, what that in between, because we're trying to use language which is binary to basically explain something trinary. So let me do my best here. But what happens is that each point has to be denoted as a space. So that in between is actually time. It's what separates one thing from another. So this is like when you have a dream and then you wake up, that dream starts to become fleeting, as if you are literally traveling and you're going further and further away from it. And this is why sometimes it becomes very difficult after a week to recall a dream that you had, let's say on Monday. So what's happening is that there's this film that's developing in between each of our lives and people that are gone now, like say dead people. And that film is actually what is creating, let's say in this tense of how we're explaining it, is that third component. So what happened, meaning that once you remove it, it's in the division symbol. You see a dot, a straight line, and a dot. It's in the percentage symbol. You see a dot, a slash, and a dot. And it's actually even in a few more symbols that all mean the same thing. They're all symbols of division. And it just shows that there's this point that we need to remove in order to unify all the components. And then what they become is not one, but zero. And this is why zero is generally removed from everything. It's supposed to mean nothing, but it also means knowing. And that's why I just did that recent video of the knowing and the gnosis and know, and what it does when you say no, like how it just stops frequencies. It just stops things from going further and further with the thinking and the thought and the mind and the energy. It's like, no. And so what I'm getting to here is that when we remove this film that basically separates us from life and death, or us between this projection and the next, then we create this unified field within ourselves. And then that's how all knowing clicks, is because all that total awareness, there's no kinks in the line. And so how the worlds are developed is they're developed with those films in between each world. And they even, on the astral plane, it even is like a gelatinous kind of field that you need to go through for a prolonged period of time before you ever get through to the other side. And the other side will generally be the next octave or the next spectrum or the next dimension, as it's called, and or the next realm. Say that
like
again?
the amniotic sac for a baby, that gelatin.
It's actually symbolically, you'll always see it in all the phases. This phase, it's actually the skin. And you probably heard me talk about that on the last recording that I did with Chris and Cherie, but that the skin is symbolically the separator between us and the reality. It's what sits in between. And also, if you really notice it, actually skin is what separates everybody from each other as far as appearance is concerned and skin color. And then on top of that, if you really want to get deeper into it, it actually shows that skin, which is the largest organ in the body, is the cognate in mysticism of the serpent, also known as the shiny serpent. And this is because it is actually the skin on the human body that creates the aura. And, this is metaphysics. The skin creates the auric field around the body because the skin is electric, like an eel. So what happens is that, and so this skin.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying this skin, it creates an illusion through light. Like when I say illusion, now most people's definition of illusion is something that's not real. But actually, that's not the definition of illusion in science. It actually means something constructed using light or illu. So what happens is in the illusion, it's basically saying something is being projected that is not completely what is the truth or the whole of something. So this is why when the person looks in the mirror, they immediately see the illusion, which is the skin. And then they go on with that, believing that they're the skin. And this is how the actual serpent, as far as the organs are concerned, because each organ is connected to a specific species. This is how that one dominates all the others. So more people are more concerned about what goes on with how they appear than they are about their liver, and they are about their heart and their spleen. Like they're more into that level of gratification. So this is why they can do things that totally destroy their liver, their heart, and everything just to have a better outer appearance. But this is, of course, why the illusion begins, because obviously the skin is not who we really are. Even if you just took the skin off a human being, we wouldn't actually even be able to recognize each other. If I came in the room skin off, you wouldn't know, oh, that's Sevan. You wouldn't have a way to really ID me. So that's exactly. So what I'm saying is that in the occult, that's known that the skin is actually what creates an illusion around the human being to make them believe that they're the skin. And then in this case, they go into this like Narcissus looking in the mirror, and then it just continues to roll like that. And that's actually the world of illusion, which is why that connects to the serpent worlds, et cetera, Vasuki, and all these different beings that they used to discuss. And it's just because of that electric field. So when we remove the skin.
Is that why? Because I know also that the skin is the largest sexual organ in the body as well. And is that why all the, Illuminati elites are into this whole satanic ritual abuse and the SRA and the abuse and torture, and they burn them and mark them on their skin? Would that be part of it?
That's more of just as an overall thing is inversion. It's it's the hangman. It's to turn the star upside down. So if we understand the symbolism properly, a pentagram by itself is not an evil symbol or a good symbol. But when we turn it upside down, it says something. It means that it's turned on its head. It means that it no longer has a focal point. It's divided. So then the horns are then pointed out as the forms of division, which is where we get our word A and B from, Arak and Bovid, which are basically the horn gods. So what's being said here is that when they go into a perversion or a distortion or an inversion, that all the energy, instead of growing up, will go down. And this is why that's how you fire energy into the netherworld. So it's like basically an upright person is basically cycling their energy upwards to the higher states of consciousness. So they eventually grow up, because that's like when someone say, hey, grow up already. They're saying, hey, get into go ahead and graduate, go to your higher state, get to the next level already. But when you invert, you go back to your primordial side. So then that's why the reptilian is always used as a symbol, because it's like saying, well, you're going to go back to the one strand DNA primordial side, where, first of all, snakes sleep generally in holes. They don't think about my wife, my kids. There's a lot about just the whole zoomorphication is what it's called. Zoomorphication, zoo encryption, to basically to use an animal as a symbol for certain things. And again, so it makes a really useful foundation for us because it's a low vibratory frequency. And if you put a seed on a high vibratory frequency, it can't even grow because it's not stable. But when you put it onto something that's slow and moving, like what they would call the Earth Mother, which is Tiamat, large serpent. Mm-hmm. If there's life growing out of it, then it's got to be life inside of it. So that kind of form is moving really, really slow. And that allows the time of the process that needs to go on for these physical vessels to go through their transformation, which we call evolution, right? But what I'm trying to get you to also see here, there's another leap that has to occur after this, right? And that's the next class. The next class, once you figure all that out, is that actually you don't have to be involved in the matrix at all.
Yep.
That the matrix, and let me just explain this very briefly, is, okay, so there's a term that you have to get familiar with, and this term is egregor. And what this means is basically you can create something by simply focusing on it, right? We've started to become aware of that with this whole law of attraction thing. But remember, the people who were initially using language knew that right off. That was the only reason for using language. So generally, language was heavily tied, invocation was heavily tied to ritual. And the process of original rituals were to basically bring down certain energies from the stars as if they were almost like a calculation to create something. So it's like, okay, at 2 o'clock at night, when this star is up in the sky, if we use this tree and walk around at this amount of time, breathe this amount of time, then this kind of energy. So basically, it's like a way to build something. It's like, instead of programming with a computer, you'd be using the stars to program. And that's what the original rituals were. And what they would create would become this being known as an egregor. That's the later term, but the only one that you can actually look up right now. And what this being would be is artificial. And the reason why it would be called artificial is not because it didn't think and not because it couldn't move on its own volition, but because it did not come out of a woman's womb. See, anything that is not coming out of a woman's womb in the occult knowledge is deemed artificial. So the reason why the secret societies began to use egregors was because they don't have the same confines as humans. They can actually move as the human soul, the beings that are attached to the human souls. It can move throughout the astral plane and actually not have all of the, let's say, reasonings and reflections that a standard soul that has a body connected to it would. So that's why you get this incallousness. I'm only answering your question. This is why you get that, okay, well, wow, how could a person do that without any feelings? Because it's artificial. It wasn't actually born in a real womb, so it doesn't have the feelings as we know it. And so the only way you can destroy an egregor, now here's another thing. Yeah. Because there's extensive knowledge written up about egregors, by the way, in occult societies in their libraries. The thing about an egregor is generally an egregor never bears any similarity after a certain period of time to how it was originally constructed. And the reason is because in order for it to maintain its form and its purpose of what it was originally created to do, the rituals and the rites must be performed as close to the originals, if not exactly like the originals, as possible. So what I'm saying is that when someone creates an egregor, they have, like, let's say a spell book that they say, hey, here's the ritual that always has to go on in order for this egregor not to get out of control. See, it can't actually die. There's only a certain way to remove them. But if they get to a point where you can't control them anymore, then you lose control. And this thing can actually move on its own volition and think. So this is actually what happened to Christianity, is that the original Gnostic version of the trifecta, or whatever they want to call it, was actually designed as a metaphorical process of taking yourself down and back up again. Just like the Mashiach would say, I can take this thing down and I can bring it back up, meaning that I could actually kill and resurrect myself all in the same process. And that's called Kundalini activation, death to rebirth process. Okay. So that's what the whole magnum opus is actually about. Now somehow That's become about painted eggs, an Easter bunny, a guy hanging on a cross, and a lot of other different things. So it's got a little confusing because the original people who did the rites, which were probably the Essenes, around that document of the anointed Isu that they put together, when it was time to pass on those rituals, that they started coming out of line. So by the time it fell into the hands of the Jesuits, it had completely lost its form and its shape. So this is very similar to how Nike is. Like initially in Nike, the guy who started, they had these best intentions in mind, and no longer than maybe 10 years, now all of a sudden they started manufacturing these shoes over in China, and they be polluting the air with the stuff. And the guy wanted to shut it down because he said, this is one of the original idea of why I started Nike. But I can't, because they're shareholders. And to get each of those shareholders to give back their shares is impossible, because some of those people only own 2 or 3 shares. So they're not going to give up their shares. So I can't stop it. This is the best example of what egregors turn into. The person who originally created it has no longer any more control over it, and it's just running amok. Now, the reason why I have to bring that up is because the strongest egregors in the world are the spiritual traditions. However, just because that the secret societies, et cetera, are not the only ones creating egregors. We're doing it too. Anytime that we form a corporation or an entity, looking at those words, I'm sure everyone knows corpus, entities, beings, whatever. It's all bringing something into life. But here's what happens. Because everyone loves to judge and point fingers, they never realize what the strongest corporation that they formed that needs to be dissolved that exists. Their physical self and what they think about themselves. Actually, that one is the main one. Now, this is what happens. As you read a little bit more in the egregors actually exist on negative and positive energy. So this means that it even benefits egregors when people hate them. So people like Donald Trump are like becoming the biggest egregors right now, because all of that hate energy is just as valuable as that fanatical energy of the people who are supporting him. And it gives more power to that egregor. So this is what's most important, of how you can be manipulated by simply what you don't like to give more power to it, to actually cause more harm to you. So it's like you're fueling something to be able to attack you with your own energy. This is madness, right? But this is how egregors move.
Magic. Well, that's black magic, right?
Magic. That's exactly black magic. So then what happens in conclusion is, in order for you to remove an egregor, it must be burned. Now, this is interesting. This is why actually the Catholics went, that's how you would decrease its energy, because the Catholics, that's why they went on this huge tirade of burning all the pagan books and things, because those are all had egregors attached to them. But also the things that fuel egregors the most is those who have belief to the core of their egregor. So this means that especially if they pass in belief of that egregor, like martyrs, because what happens is their bones even become antennas to emit the power and the strength and the idea of the egregor. So this will show you why in most cemeteries, there's always a bunch of crosses. There's always the bones are still there. And then most of those people, almost 80%, are like, Jesus, help me, because that's their last religion. Even if they weren't even doing anything with that tradition, right on the deathbed, God, you said, if I ever proclaimed your name and said I was forgiven for my sins, that you would, and then they die in that state. But see, the thing is that they've frozen themselves basically in time as a projector or antenna for an eidolon that they had actually no knowledge of what it does and what it's truly about, especially now. So then like I said, I got to still bring it back central to the person. So then this is what happens. This is, I think Joe Dispenza talks a little bit about this. Now, when it's time for you to like move on to your quote unquote higher self, guess who doesn't want to go? Egregor. See, because the egregor that we created in this world with this idea of who we think that we are is artificial. I mean, it just is. We have to understand. So when it's time to kill this thing, though, because it believes in death, because it believes in birth. That's the other tricky thing. You believe in birth, you got to believe in death. So because it believes in birth, it believes in death, it believes it's getting older, it believes it can get hurt, it believes in pain. What actually is created is something that even becomes stronger than the person's spiritual will for a while. So then what happens is the battlefield of Arunja starts. Now you must battle this demon. And this is why the egregors and eidolons have always been seen as Agatha daemons, or basically very large demonic life forms that sometimes look deformed and distorted. And the reason is because the logic of actually accepting that this physical body is the shit, if you may, is a deformed, demented thought. We're so much more. So anyway, what's poured into all of that, you know, just the way people think, what we call the craziness, how people have been programmed, how we've been programmed, all of that, if you saw that thing in front of you, it would look like a demon. Like it would literally be deformed and distorted, not symmetrically perfect, based on phi, like some goddess just moving through the clouds. That's not what you would see. You would see like Jabulon or something like that. So you would see a chimera. Okay. So this is the final battle. And that final battle basically consists of you dissolving this character that you put so much energy in, so that way you can actually become who you truly are. But you can see how that's so difficult, because again, if there's a lot of pointing the fingers going on, it's so difficult to point the finger back at yourself and say, but according to what you're saying about the construction of this eidolon, that actually is the real explanation of how we construct ourselves. We move in circles. This is called anu or annual. This is every year. We go through these birthday rituals and all these other rituals that concentrate more of who we think that we are. And then all we're doing is we're pouring more and more time and energy and attention into something that actually is not what we really want. And this is why nobody wants to die. Nobody wants to do any of that stuff, really. And so this is how it's all connected, though. This is the framework behind all of that. And this also, like I said, the reason why I say knowing is half the battle, because even knowing that kind of stuff let you become aware of where the resistance actually is. It's not necessarily coming all the time from this external force sitting over in Bohemian Grove worshiping some kind of owl statue. It's most of the time coming right from yours truly, standing in the way of self, because it's learned principles that have been all binary and dualistic. And then where they're trying to get, say that again?
That's exactly what I said. That's what I do with my clients is shadow work, Sevan. And I help them take a look at the stories they tell themselves and their self-limiting beliefs and their, habits or ways of being in the world, or the stories they tell themselves about who they are, and make them take a look and see if it actually is true, or if they just picked it up from somebody else, and does it really apply?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what it is. That's the work that's got to be done by all of us. That's why at the end of the day, it's nobody else's responsibility to ascend others. Like we get rid of this whole idea of the hero. I call it the hero program. And, we do our best. But the person who flips that switch, it's always going to be the person. And the greatest teachers, they make him put this together in a way where the person doesn't even know that they're being taught. And until then, we have this throughput to deal with, which is basically us sharing knowledge with each other. I guess they would call that bearing witness. Hey, that's something that I've experienced too, or this is something that makes sense. Like I said, the reason why we started open source spirituality is because instead of just these 3 eyes that I have, now there's 28,000 eyes. Like I said, there's 14, 15,000 people in the network. So with, 30,000 eyes all over the world, you could then pull in knowledge from different spaces that you may not have access to develop an entire spaces that you may not have access to develop an entire picture. Like I think it's even possible actually to map the dream world. If everyone collectively started reporting what they saw when they saw it, we probably could even map out that plane. But those kind of projects are, they're put on hold for the new Facebook VR, and just silly stuff.
It's going to be the next plug into your brain, and it's going to download that shit.
Exactly. They're going to look to see if they can record the dream and all this kind of stuff and kind of profane it in some kind of way. But I will say that when you create something, it always comes out in the state that you're in. And that's the biggest key to making sure that whatever you do doesn't fall into the hands of some kind of nefarious kind of scenario that's counterproductive to what you originally did with it.
Yeah.
And then now we're learning trinary. So remember, a lot of the egregors and eidolons and things that were created that actually were created with this intention that it would be a good thing. Yeah. Still, we're missing certain levels of knowledge that we do have with us now through experience, which I think the whole thing is just like, okay, well, we won't do that again. And it's just now we're at this point where I think that we were at this point in the 80s, to tell you the truth. I mean, every time I look at something from the 80s, and, I was born in 78. So I actually caught like the thick of the 80s because, when I was like 7 or 8 years old was when everything was really going on. But you see this energy moving across. Now, unfortunately, the Illuminati, because they were actually funding all that music, it was the beginning to what's going on with, the crazy rap music and, some of the rock music that's out now and all these kind of different channels of music. They have to start it off with getting everyone attracted to it.
Mm.
And so then,
They
so we
have,
can,
have,
yeah, so we can actually see
yeah, they
with
have,
just in the, go ahead. I think I got a little delay going on.
yeah, I think you do, because I thought there was space there, but no, I said, it doesn't matter what I said. You go ahead and finish your thoughts.
No, I'm just, you know, this is, we're winding down here. So I'm just saying that if you look at the energy and the essence, you see this national, multiracial thing being pushed across, and you see how great it makes everybody feel. And this is like, you know, when you're looking at, you know, some of Lionel Richie's songs and these kind, like there's tons of them, you know, even Cyndi Lauper, you know, all these different people, you're the dancers, and you see everyone together and you're like, okay, this is actually how it's supposed to feel. This is going to get us in that direction. But then, of course, that was just the, hey, let's get everyone into looking at these music, and let's get ourselves the money that we need to keep pushing across, the recognition that we keep pushing across. And then now let's start changing it. And then you start seeing the change with certain artists come in. And then now you see it's completely gotten to another level. And that's kind of how they play the game. So sometimes if you want to time travel, though, just go hit the 80s playlist. And then you'll actually be able to like get yourself out of any kind of dark funk that you may be in for too long, by just simply turning on, you know, 80s playlist on YouTube, and it will actually transport you back into that time with that energy and that essence, because that's actually what everyone thought was going on. Yep. See, actually, because at times what the controllers have in mind and what's going on is always two different things, right? So if you're trying to tap right into energy portals, everyone that was during that time, also Mount Shasta time, by the way, but in that time specifically, they felt that, okay, we're going to go towards world unity. We're going to put roses basically in the barrels of guns. We're going to take over oligarchy, all of this. So that was the mode of thought. Now, it didn't happen, of course, because all things weren't considered. And this is what I'll leave the conversation with today. See, I consider everything. That's why I know about all these different fields, that some conscious person may say, well, brother, why are you even studying electronics? Why do you have machines around you? Brother, why you? But they're telling me this on the phone. You know, like, there's all this what's not supposed to be done. But meanwhile, if we keep doing it the same way, we're probably going to get the same results. So we need to dig a little bit deeper. So when I study all this stuff, also, I find there's actually an underlining commonality between everything that works, even cars. Like I can actually identify every single part of a car to you of what the dimensional version is of that. Same thing with the computer. Like the CPU, the central processing unit, is obviously the sun. The little circuits that are actually on the board, the little dots that are there that connect the serpents, those are the stars. The actual memory bases of the memory that's actually being kept, that's actually residing within the human beings. So all of the components, from the processors to the CPU to the hard drive and all that, actually comes from a diagram from the human body. And that's why the old people used to say, son, don't reinvent the wheel. What are they talking about? They're talking about Rota. They're talking about Sator, which is the tarot, the wheel of the human body. 360 degrees, a perfect circle, the phi-based scenario that we're in. So if you try to reinvent it, it's not going to work, whatever you're designing. And that's why a lot of things don't work, because they're not built. They're sometimes, for the ones that are in the know about this, they try to come as close as possible. Like Big Pharma, Big Chemo does that a lot. And then they deviate. And what that causes a side effect. So anything that you build, if you take that same diagram and say, so what's the heart of it? You know, what's the bowels of it? And you just take the 5 points basically, and you design something based on that, it's basically impenetrable. Like it basically reaches perpetual energy. The human being was actually designed to be perpetual. It's just, you know, it is kind of perpetual except for the interruption points. And then how we remove that interruption point and to form a continuum with ourselves is we remove ourselves from time. And the only way to remove yourself from time is to connect with that other half, because this is symbolic to why you can't see the other half of the moon. Symbolic to why you're using only half of a language. Symbolic to why people prefer all these different things. Like I prefer daytime. I prefer blue. I prefer, and they have all these preferences, but then they have this other list of things they don't prefer. And then that's what keeps them blind to who they truly are, right? The whole aspect of things.
Creating the duality. No,
Exactly.
Absolutely. You were talking about the 80s. I graduated high school in 1984, like George Orwell's book. And I grew up to all that music. I actually have a playlist that's just called music. That's basically all that stuff that actually I played for Brett when we had a dinner party right before I left to cheer me up and put me in a good mood. I always play that old music.
The time machine.
Totally.
That's why it's always played at a wedding.
Right. Yeah, yeah, because it's to disguise what's really happening. That and a couple drinks, 80s music, couple drinks.
Yeah. Oh my.
Well, once again, Sevan, it's been an amazing conversation,
doubt.
and like I said in the beginning, knowing you, we cover all the topic matter that
Absolutely.
all the titles.
Yeah,
Always did.
you picked everything on the list. I was like, okay, so she's gonna let me know about one of these, and I'm gonna dial it in. No, that's not what happened. She was like, we're gonna do all of them. I was like, I should have known not to give Lisa some choices. Like, and that's always what I say these days. Like when somebody says, which one should I do, this one or this one? It's like so quick for me to say both. Like, because you notice how like choices fry the brain.
Yeah.
Oh, last jewel. You got to get this last jewel because it all makes it click for you. Remember, there's a reptilian portion of the brain, right? It's on Wikipedia, R complex. The R complex, you could imagine this like a gear in a clock. When you engage the R complex, it actually moves the process of thought backwards. And this is because it's the primordial side of the brain. So if you engage it for anything, and actually it's engaged through language and it's engaged through thought. Like people need to study it a little bit more. Like the R complex is tied into words because that whole higher level of your brain doesn't communicate with words, right? So that R complex, that's why when you're meditating or anything like that and you start thinking, the energy, you feel it going down. So people should understand, again, that the reason why we're working on moving out of that whole thinking side of things is because it puts these interruptions into our wheel. And the most important thing for us to nullify the time and get rid of that film that's between us and the continuum is to remove that fusing that occurs every time we need to go and think about something and we need to judge something. Because then when you remove that out of the way, it's like a free-flowing wheel. It's like a thermometer or a thermostat that can keep going higher and higher and higher and higher because you never stop. And people call that the zone or zen because they're not actually thinking about, I'm going to, if it's a basketball player, then I'm going to land this shot. I can see the trajectory, 45 degrees, 394 on the parallax. No, that's not what they're doing. That's the difference between the serpent's knowledge, right? Like it wants to measure shit. That's what it's called a dimension because they want all the sizes, right? Look, demon Zion, okay? It's right there. Zion means an actual projection coming from the mind. Dimension. So it's just, and demon or daemon comes from the word diamond, which is 666 coal.
And my son's name, Damon.
Damon, coal. So you start with that rough cut stone, the coal, and then you put it under pressure in the crucible, what they call the crucifixion. You're now in a hermetically sealed crucible. That's called a planet. And all this pressure and stress from the gravity and everything else, everything, all the pressure and stress is supposed to press down on you to make you 1,000 times stronger. This was supposed to be the alchemical process of the original architect. So if we want to understand, that's why I say you can opt out of this whole thing and go on to the great expansion that I was talking about earlier, or you can continue because there's a purpose here. You can continue to be a part of the architect's alchemical projection. That's AA, which means the Illuminati, the real one. And the alchemical projection of the original architect is to distill the entire species. And how this works is anything that you don't like, generally distill and synthesize the entire species, the apex of the species. In this case, it would be humans. Anything that you don't like if you don't like homosexuals, right? Generally, your children come out without a problem with homosexuals. Okay. So this is what happens. So now that child doesn't have that judgment, but then that child may also have other things that it doesn't like. But its child will too not like it. And this is why the 80s became so dynamic, is because it was actually the part where you're starting to see what the synthesis is really doing. First, it was like everyone was almost like animals in their own tribe, and like boars don't mate with zebras. Okay, that's kind of how everyone really saw it. Just so I really want you to understand, this is exactly what's going on behind the skin suits. People are made in their totem of different animals that normally, the totem animals that they have are already the animals that the architects begin to blend, and is finding that there's becoming some symbiotics. The easiest way to look at this is cats. Cats are reptiles and felines, or like a lion, together in the same body. This is why the cat's eye is not the same as a lion's eye. A lion's eye is circle, a cat's eye is convex. but the cat's body is obviously not the same as a reptile because, I mean, that's obvious, but it's a blend because that's what the Kometans showed you. The Kometans showed you that they could take two forms that are completely against each other. Have you ever seen a cat and a snake together? Like out in the wild, like a lion and a snake, they just go at it. But notice how the symbol of Yaldabaoth is a lion snake. I'm just trying to get people to understand that there's a grand architect really here. They're not playing about that. It's actually an androgynous being that in the societies, that's what they are attempting to worship. I'm not sure what their relationship is with it because the ignorant stuff they do actually don't show too much of a connection with a form that could be this sentient. And what it's launched off to do, and like I said, you're a part of it because you're accepting the body ID and the matrix, but you don't have to be a part of it. But you need to know at least what's going on. What it's planning to do is the entire alchemical treaty, which when you study and read it, what it's doing is it's basically making all of the most volatile components fused together to create one panacea. Okay, so in a nutshell, all the conflicts that we're seeing go on is still producing for the architect eventually in a reality to where the apex being doesn't have any judgments. Let me simplify this. As it keeps going on, if you fast forward this 50 years in the future, this thing is going to look really strange. All the division lines are going to start blending back in together. And eventually you'll start having beings come out that don't have any judgments. This means they won't have any limits from the time they're born. This was known as the child. Okay. And once that being is born, that's the end of the construct because every single person's mind, now we're talking about the minds, will all be contained in that one being. And the reason why is because everything that you consider is a limitation is something else's. It doesn't have that same limitation. And this was hidden in the Hindu scripts about one God, young God, basically chaste, pious, virgin, doing all the great things, good stuff, quote unquote, right? But here's about another God, OG God, was that had way more power than all the other gods, but actually had a track record for doing rather nefarious things.
Indra.
Indra, exactly. So at one point, they meet and the conversation goes as simple as this. How come I'm pure, basically, not doing anything that serves Rakshas, but I'm not more powerful than you? And the being said, because where you haven't gone, I've already been. And because of that alone, I'm more powerful than you. And so this is what I'm saying is the distillation of this entire reality is actually in a being that doesn't have any hindrances or any judgments. And that makes them a magical child. They never actually reach adulthood as we know it. And then they become extracted, meaning that the last part of the alchemical process is literally like what you would read in certain UFO stories or you would see in the movie The Fifth Element. That being is then extracted. Now, I don't know if that's going to take 50,000 years, 100,000 years, or 20 years. All I'm saying is still remember that this whole thing that you're seeing designed around us is not just like here, you know what I mean? It's not without purpose. It's not, there's the sheer complexity of it alone. Yeah, I mean, that just wake up that, hey, nobody puts this much work and all this kind of stuff together if there's not something else, something else going on. And that's something else going on because many people are confused about it. They want to know, well, what is society's doing? It's not even them anymore. Like they were never the ones in control. A secret society always remains a secret. People are still they don't even know Diaboli, Ordinati, and Intrepidi. And all those societies were much more stronger than the Illuminati ever became. And on top of that, when you're talking about secret society, you're really more close to talking about the mafia. And that mafia has been going on way before even the United States, even it came into inhabitants as we know it right now. So all I'm saying is that there is knowledge about already a grand plan that is taking place with a group of beings that are looking to basically produce the next apex creation. And that apex creation is basically a fusing of all sexes, a fusing of all life forms, and a fusing of all knowledge and intelligence all into one being. And the process that people are going through on Earth is to condition themselves for that process and to bring out their gold in that shape. So that's the last thing I'll say after that. But remember, like I always said, you don't got to be a part of somebody else's alchemical projection. You already got your own going on.
Yep.
So I wouldn't want somebody to basically teach me how to be a dualistic person just so that I can make a person that's not dualistic. But that's really what's happening. Like we're being embedded and entrained with hate. Just so the next process could be for us to produce something that doesn't have that hate. So it's like our bodies and our consciousness is being used like on a laboratory level to begin to produce something that is for something else. And that's what they call getting played. And that's all I got to say in this is that just remember that it's not all moving with just wherever we decide. There's a bigger plan going on here, and we can move ourselves right on out of this thing and go on to back to the tip of the sun, forever young, no possessions, no weight, no sunset, no time, everything in that experience. And
we're all
this is
the same spot.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a Greek version of you. There's a Egyptian version of you. Yep. There's a version of us running on every single epoch and timeline. But I just think after a while, it's like, you know what? I've seen this all before. And it really does get like that. Like, I'd rather see the higher aspects of it, because that's the other thing. It's like now we're actually looking at the lower aspects of things. At least if you're on your galactic ship and you're sailing across this, there's a time and place for everything. There's no reason for you to engage your oars. You'll see it all like a pageant, just for you to bring this all in to understand what it is. It's like you're in a ship and you move across the sky like a pageant. In each space that you enter into, but you'll be there at its height. So it's not great to see Venus when she's at her low point. Like, I mean, actually, you better run. It's more like a Lilithian force. But if you could catch her in her high point or in her climax, see, that's what I'm trying to explain to everyone here. There's a climax of life. Like there's actually Rome in its heyday still going on. There's Kemet in its heyday still going on. When we choose to go into certain vibrations and frequencies when they're in their climax, then we experience that. The only way for us to truly do that infinitely is for us to get on to the current. And if we don't think that, like right now, the game being played is that current is now become money or currency. And that now we're using that as a form of how we're powering ourselves, versus we used to use only star force and energy. And the last thing, the reason why I keep saying there's nothing, there's a time and a place for everything. And it means that then there's never this rush. You ever feel like, okay, I need to create this right now. There's a time that's better to create than others, for sure. Just like you don't plant certain things in the winter. And so when you get on that synchronicity, and that's really what it's the astrolabe. Like you got to go, you could go on eBay, and I think, I might as well cut my camera on really quick. There's one as small as this, but in the astrolabe, you see this? Like this is the astrolabe, but as small as this. This is the world's first and most efficient computer. It tells me exactly what's going to go on and when it's going to go on. Why? Because I can even tell how high a building is from how it casts its shadow. And then from that, I could tell exactly what the position of the stars are actually at. So I can set this. Then I can know exactly how fast it's moving. And then if I know the stars, and I know what energies are coming across. And this is the astrolabe. This is what a nautical engineer of the old days needed to cross the ocean. There's bigger ones. But when we pair this with metaphysical, the only thing that I find is the biggest issue is that it's not that the knowledge is not here. Actually, we have a little bit too much knowledge. We need metaphysics attached to it. Because you got a guy right now sitting in the dodo ring, which is basically a ring that cancels out all frequencies. And he's just doing experiments to try to figure out what astronauts, if they exist, are going to feel like in space, because there's certain frequencies that are not present. But if for one moment that guy got some metaphysical knowledge, because it takes 9 years of study to be in a dodo ring. And it's funny they call it a dodo. Then he would like go into a whole fucking eureka and realize that he actually knows how to collapse standing waves, and he can rip a hole right in time. So then notice how now there's a new movie coming out. You can see how they're going to keep pouring it. Like they're not giving up. Like people are already like gassed out. Now they're going to introduce The Wrinkle of Time. Now that was a book as a kid that I remember, but and then listen. Then you get Oprah Winfrey coming back. Now Oprah Winfrey is pretty much the dark Yoruban goddess walking around the dimension in the flesh. So this means she's basically the dark Yoruban goddess See, okay, so there's a cult of dark goddesses, by the way. It's right now being embodied by Rihanna, Beyonce, and Oprah Winfrey. Like Oprah Winfrey spells her company name backwards, Harpo. You know, this is how the magic begins to work. You know, there's a lot. That's a whole nother show. But again, what I'm saying is that there's a in the Yoruban pantheon, which is voodoo, which is actually where the word Europe comes from, because it was Europa. Europa is Europe, but Europa, the word comes from Yoruba or Yoruba. These words basically mean voodoo, okay? That's why it's a voodoo goddess, okay? And there's a dark side and there's a light side, just like with everything. On binary stars, you're going to get the good side and the bad side. There's a good side to Saturn, by the way, for everyone that's just thinking Saturn is a bad guy or woman. It's more like a Mrs. Doubtfire, but there's a good side and there's a bad side. So just any binary world is always going to consist of that. So when they attempt to use that Lilithian force, which is the dark side of Venus, that's what they're bringing out. And that's why women are confusing the divine feminine for lust, twerking, sex, boobs, all these kind of silicone, you know, all those kind of things that's all night side stuff of the Yoruban goddess when she's in her distorted form. So we have not seen, and I'm not saying that you aren't, because you're a good example, but a good, basically any kind of, there's not too many archetypes for young women and old women alike to follow after that equal the balanced side. Because see, even if you're the good side of the goddess, it's just as dangerous as being the bad side of the goddess. We have to realize that. So we need balanced beings. So that's what I'm saying, is that we got to remember those, that they're continuously pulling up their occult world. That's actually what you see in music now. All the producers are rabbis like Lyre Cohen, Jimmy Levine, Rick Rubin. All those guys are heavy level sorcery based Kabbalists. And so they know how the whole thing works. They know how it works in frequencies, beats. They understand the entire thing. And then here comes the dark goddesses with all of their music and entrancing and how they move. You know, it's like it's mesmerizing because also the goddess is hingeless. If you ever really see her on the astral plane, she doesn't have hinges and she doesn't have skin. So of course, this is not the standard thing that a guy is like. Look, I got to give you that, because you love the goddess tradition. But when I seen the goddess, she had no skin and she had no hinges. And what this allowed her to do is to gyrate in complete form, right? So it was terrifying to me. Like, I didn't have that whole thing like I was looking at a Playboy magazine or something. It was terrifying, right? And so I had to pull myself back together. And it said, Sevan, basically we're trying to reveal a mystery to you. And I'm like, yeah, but go away. But
it was one of those
think about what you're looking at here. And then what was conferred is that, see, the height of what women are doing right now with the shaking their bodies and even the belly dancers is about 5%, 6% tops of what the divine feminine can do.
Heaven, yeah.
And listen, and you're having a hard time with that. So imagine if the divine feminine cut it up to about 20 to 30%, everyone would be zombified. So sure enough, if you go back in history, you actually find that many cultures were zombified by the goddess, right? And that's where it becomes the goddess. And it's just because, some goddesses became so powerful and they just wanted the power of others. And they even showed that in the movie American Gods, where basically this goddess who was Belkis, who's known as the Queen of Sheba, was pulling energy right in through her vagina, entire men. Okay. And this is just giving you a metaphor that, people could be spaced out off of that too. And then the skinless thing was where I learned the secret about the serpent, because the two are one and the same when you're talking about the divine feminine force. But the divine feminine, as it truly is, does not exist with the skin or an ID. Because, she's just wild, untamed, unhindered, gyrating, hingeless, skinless, wham. You see what I mean? And then the world cannot withstand it. And that's the end of the day. It's like, we have to realize that you don't want to bring this kind of thing onto this little finite, limited dimension. She's going to be pissed off in the first place. Like, I'm pissed off for being here. So you're talking about bringing phenomenal cosmic power into this itty bitty living space and acting like it's going to go well. People need to realize what's actually happening. Even for me, I met a guy that finally told me what I had done when I used that mantra. And he said, son, there's no one that I've ever seen that has ever used that word and ever been sane again. But look at you. You got a family, you got a house, you got all these different things. This is a miracle within itself, because what you did is the equivalent of letting a nuclear weapon off inside of you. Okay. And this is because, and again, long story short, the vibrations and tones of the lost word attempt to bring God here. That's what that last word, that's why the queen has a ring and she says, one ring will control them all. And one ring and one word will control them all. And then the darkness of the ignorance will bind them. That's what the ring says. That's the same ring that they're using on the, the Lord of the Rings. Where this ring's the ring of Solomon, this ring, the mystical level of this ring is basically saying what's written on that ring is the real name of God. Okay. And then now this God we would be referring to is the one that the predecessor. Okay. Yeah. And when that name is mentioned, if it's used, if it's evoked into the dimension, it's the equivalent of attempting to try to bring God here. And people never think about it. And then put it into a human body. You would basically, and that's why people go crazy. You're trying to bring a force that is unhindered, almost limitless. If its only limitation was the name. And that's why if it can be named, it can be controlled. And that's why the whole language was supposed to be mystical. We weren't supposed to talk because then we evoke. And it was the serpent's idea. And we're coming close to the end here. It was the serpent's idea to create a being. These are the human bodies, not the spirit. Spirit's not created. It doesn't come from anywhere. It's the anomaly. Create a human body so that way we can say things. See, the serpent can't talk. It only hisses and spits. It doesn't have a fully developed vocal box. So this is why the whole mystery is that basically the serpent created the human bodies on the Phi-based program, Phi. And then with the voice box could use us through whispering, telling us what to do through whispers. Because when it received the rebuking from the God, it was cursed down to the ground. So it basically was made terrestrial. And from that, it lost its ability to ascend. We can ascend with our voice. Notice how, anytime you're going to sing it, and you can start working yourself up into something totally different. So what I'm saying is that this voice box is the most powerful thing. And if we weren't so busy with some of these darker nefarious forces with their hand up our butts, it's saying things. And this is why in the Arab text, to close the door on this, Udumallahi minala shaitan regime. Allah, God, higher self, whoever, protect me from the whispers of this shaitan. Whispers. So when you go and look back as why did it say whispers? It's because it speaks in a tone that you can't hear audibly like this. The most that you can hear of it is a ringing in your ear. That's why some people say, well, when I have my angel tuner, ding, ring, and those are high vibratory tuning forks, and they make this ringing sound because that is what actually entities sound like that don't have voice boxes but are present. You get this ring sound, and that's them. That's their energy signature. So for us, we have this. Basically, we have a voice box, so we don't just have that ringing. We also have a way to actually evoke. And so this is what I want to explain to people. And last but not least, that voice in your mind, I always say, if that's you that's talking, who's listening? Because either you're going to infer that both of these are you, or maybe what you're hearing is not you. So this is how it works. And they're even doing this with the technology. But the most powerful version of it has always been the insects and always been the serpentine forces. They send off a frequency. It comes to us as like a ring. It's even lower than what we can hear as the ring. And we translate it into words. And then these words, because we're translating them right to ourselves, we believe they come from us. And only until you truly have heard yourself. Like I've actually gotten to a point where I realized in a certain session that all that thing that had been talking to me for different parts of my life on certain occasions wasn't even me. And I couldn't tell the difference because I never had really heard myself before. And that's just an important thing to remember, is sometimes those thoughts that are coming through your mind that are causing a lot of conflict are actually coming from other life forms that can benefit from that conflict, just like the bacteria that causes toxoplasmosis gets inside of rats so it can get into a cat's body. So this means that this thing knows how to do shit that use the same thing as candida. Candida produces thoughts that the person wants to eat sugar, and this is the candida down there like, yeah, send some signals to the brain. We need donuts. And then you're thinking, man, I got to get a donut like right now. And it's not even you. So I just want to, again, demystify the thing for people. Remember, like, some of those suggestions that are coming to your mind that could equal heavy levels of pitfalls don't actually are not coming from you. But then look. But when it's time to blame somebody, though, they love to blame it on you. Like when you're sitting there with a double bypass heart surgery, it's like, look what have I done to myself? Actually, it was candida, but who's pointing fingers?
Yeah. I don't even.
Like, so there it is. Wholeness and balance vibrations. Remember,
there it is.
Is all around you, and you. You know, we're working towards this total collectivism as far as in our reality, getting to the unify rather than the universe. Collapsing this whole binary dualistic code, which is just burning up all our energy in the judgment, and getting ourselves back to getting ourselves forward, actually, to the trinary code, so that we can restore ourselves, repair ourselves, and then start entering into this flight to where we get on this galactic ocean and we sail, and we know how to blow wind in our own selves. We know how to motivate ourselves, all in the vein that all is self, and we're in no rush to get to anything because we know we're going to see the highest versions of it all. And that's what it is to sail in the galactic ocean. You know, in 3 months, we're going to be in Aruba. So there's no reason in desiring to be in Aruba right now. That's all I tried to get across during this conversation is, remember, when you get in sync, you know you're eventually going to see it all anyway. So you're in the moment only absorbing what you can look at right now, because you're going to get over it. You're going to get there. So remember, like everyone it's only going to say, remember that you don't die, that there's no end to this, that the more that you're aware that now you've learned, now you must unlearn. You don't need all this knowledge. You don't need all this thought. All you need is that space of all knowing, and you're already there. So that's all I got to say, just for today. that gets my morning started.
Yeah. Man.
Consciousness, caffeine, and
I'm gonna go to bed.
conspiracy in a nutshell. What'd you say, Brett?
Exactly. In a nutshell. Well, that's what I like. It's already been. I'm just having a look. Like we're getting into 2 hours 35 minutes.
Exactly. And remember, it's morning time for me. He's over here at midnight. He's a little bit over midnight right now. So yeah, but that's what it is. I'm sure everyone will be able to digest this in their own time. And I just want to say thank you to both of you for having me on and allow me to deliver the message today. And then obviously, if anyone wants to check us out, they can check us out at secretenergy.com. If people are looking for more of a methodical approach, because we were kind of like everywhere sailing today, you can check out the university, because it's definitely like a curriculum-based step-by-step of what we're talking about now, how we came to this, and how you can identify it for yourself. And then most importantly, how you can tap into your own arcana.
I love it. All your links will be below. I'm pretty sure we've got them.
They're already there.
They're already there.
All the links for Secret Energy and the university. All of Sevan's.
Yeah, and then also their spirit text also for anyone who, you're looking for a way to get out of the job. Check us out at Spirit Text. We're open source wealth. This means, why make it hard for you? I find that when I get into any of these companies, organizations in the past, that somebody's afraid you're going to take their job. Like it's all this competition.
Yeah.
What we're doing is that there's a real process right now for how the industries work, especially if you're doing something online. If you don't really understand how marketing and all that kind of stuff works, it could be frustrating. And if you don't think you need to market at all, then you don't get visibility. So what we're doing is we're demystifying all that, and we're like putting it right in front of the person's. Here's what the articles look like. Here's what the ads look like. Here's PSDs to changing it. You could put your own image in there. So we want to do that for each other, because while all this has been exceptionally, all the stuff, the fields and all that have been exceptionally proficient at demystifying spiritual knowledge, we want to put it and give it a go on the physical and see if it can do that same thing. I believe it can, but we want to demystify this whole financial situation for everyone, because that's the biggest holdup. That's the last, as you know, Brett, that's that little linchpin that doesn't give everyone the time, the opportunity that they need to really absorb this. This is not a path, is not one step, right? It's several steps. So we want to be able to build some infrastructure around the people that need to start even on the journey from where we were like 5 or 6 years ago, and then be able to, you know, get them going along the way. So that's what that is, spirittext.com.
Basically, Brett, what Sevan's website is a, you know, the video we did about how to access your birth certificate trust. Well, what did we get? 1 million people asking how to do it. Well, we're like, well, you know, first I had to study law 7 years before I could even begin to understand what this video is about. Yeah. So what this is, and everybody wanted to know, well, this is all that knowledge for consciousness. It's like a conscious university. And instead of rules and a structured, got to go like this, you follow your own Gnostic energy, and it's co-creative. He's giving people an option to actually get out of the job, and what he means by that is, you know, the 9 to 5 thing, and be able to do something that you're passionate about, and be able to earn an income, and be able to stop seeing limitation and only start looking at potentials. Here we go with Buckminster Fuller again.
Yeah, absolutely.
He didn't start trying to say, oh, this is what we're doing wrong in the world. He created something that's going to take the place of, as all that stuff is falling and people are having their dark nights of the soul and money, whatever happens with money or the economy or all of that kind of stuff. Sevan's already got it. It's so great when I saw Secret Energy, when you find, because you had one before that. You had the 2010?
Resistance 2010, yeah.
Which was awesome. But my first website I created was the intention of doing something like yours, but mine's so like 5 octaves below.
Well, it's that whole web design thing. That's another thing that we're demystifying, because I find people have amazing messages. Many people have amazing messages, but they just didn't really nail it in the tech area. I mean, because after all, they're almost like oil and water. And, you know, the truth is that this world is so judgmental. So if it doesn't look like it's supposed to look, I just actually recently did a class on just getting it to look right. Like what color palettes do, what fonts do, you know, and that we have this extra course that we're calling ambassador training now. So the same thing that I did with the university, I'm now doing with just the whole getting your idea off the ground, your invention off the ground, and how to get your mindset for that. And we're actually into our 4th lecture now, but it's just as dynamic, but it just deals with that whole, just the matrix side. We call it the matrix mechanics. So it's basically how to punch the right codes into this field to get the results that you're actually looking for. And with no fluff. Like I don't have time to really waste people's time. I'm not looking for, hey, pay me indefinitely, none of that kind of stuff. We want to, you know, get this on the road already. So anyway, that's enough of me. I just wanted to say thanks to everyone. And this has been amazing. And I love sharing the time with you. And I look forward to coming forward. I never say coming back. How could I come back to something?
I'll see you in the next
morning. I mean, what am I sad about? You know, it's been a week. I mean, how do I not have any energy? You know, all these words, you know, to justify. So hopefully when I come forward, we can drill into this even more. Maybe Brett come back on and share some of the stuff that he's known, maybe ask some questions.
Absolutely.
See if we can get a nice, another nice powwow going on, but it's been real.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Man, I wanted to ask you about the Westworld and what you thought about that, the new TV show.
Oh yeah, man. You know, because Westworld was actually an old book, like an old series. There was an initial Westworld, and man, when I was watching that for a while, I was like, man, you know what? I cannot take the blatant, you know, because they're just blatant. It's like, yeah, and it's really, I mean, I think the biggest thing that's being highlighted is that whole aspect of programming reality, and how much is a program? I mean, I think that it's a little bit overwhelming at this point, exactly how much the programming is going on, and then the small amount of people that the programming is actually coming from, and then how they can literally play in the world. And I think that's what the Westworld was really saying, is that for those who had the wherewithal, the connections or the money or the affiliations or whatever, could really use and abuse the world, because that, you know, that's all of what was being depicted, for women getting abused to, you know, so that to me is that same approach that is like literally saying, hey, this is what's going on, this is what we're doing, and we're now to the point where we want to make you love it, right? And that's where the warping comes in, because you get people that actually love it. They're like, yeah, I want to do that too. You know, you find actually more people that will email you about, so how do I join the Illuminati? And people that are trying to avoid it. They're like, I heard your whole conversation on the Illuminati, and it seems like that you weren't really in favor of what they're doing, but how do you join it? And it's like, are you serious? But, you know, but you can see how it could get to that level when people feel like, because now we're basically dealing with the youth, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of kids in the world, you know, everyone's been pretty fertile in our generation. So you have all these kids, and it's like they have no attention span because they're already ready to basically create and develop. They're not trying to sit in school. And then their mentors are whatever freak show they can pull out next and pay, and then make the person believe that if they, I mean, I see industry right now as the crazier you act, that's how you're going to get views. And if you don't act crazy, then you're not going to get no views. And that's pretty much the standard. The more stupid or the more ignorant you can be, then there's no, then you're going to get views. But if you're trying to be boiled down and you're trying to be presentable and you're trying to do that, like I'm 7 years, 50,000 views. My peer group, because also I don't really travel in the safe zone a lot. So that means that I'm not going to tell you everything is good for you and that everything feels great and call me again tomorrow. But my peers that did that, they're at about 500,000 views from the time that I started. But again, it just once again proves that people love to hear just the good part. And then what I've done is just the justice of giving like both sides so we can find the in between. So that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Marrying that reptilian and mammalian DNA in the right and the left brain, right?
Animal Planet. That's enough of Animal Planet.
So we do have to close up now because I don't know many people who have an almost 3-hour attention span. Although, once we've had the experiences, the ones that we've had, there's no time there. And I resent having to come back to time.
We were living in the moment during this conversation. I'm not sure about the people who are going to have to catch it after this. So anyone who was probably on the line, they're probably still there. But in the future, they're going to look right. They're going to hover right over it where they can see how long it is and be like, No, actually what they always do is they kind of chunk in a little bit, right? They may chunk in a quarter and then chunk in again. So hopefully, during those times they hear some stuff that's like, okay, I need to go back to the beginning.
We've got Papa Wheelie saying he's right in here laughing with us in the chat. Thanks, Papa.
Well, sending you two and everybody else on the line all the best.
Yes.
Together.
The one thing we do have from the show when it was on audio only on Blog Talk Radio is we do the quick what I'm grateful for before we go. So thank you again, Sevan. This was awesome. And of course, it's only opened up not only the questions, there's a million more. So maybe we'll cover the things we didn't cover, or maybe we'll have a whole new octave to overlay to try to get to the next time.
If you drill into any one of those topics that we skated lightly over, it will eventually roll back into other things anyway, because it's all supposed to be connected, and that's how the wheel should move. So it's good that we can have these times of just, collecting knowledge and being with each other. And, just to end it off on the note that 2.0 always ends up with these days is, I'm grateful for everything. There's nothing I would change. And I think that when we learn about time travel, you learn if you change some stuff in the past, you can definitely have a butterfly effect. So I'm leaving everything as it is because I'm glad where I am right now, because if I change something, I may come back as a frog or something. Who knows? We can get more bearing we can get more bearing. I mean, of exactly what's going on here, seeing the potential. We could go over this lightly.
I nearly ran over the frog going down the driveway last night.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah. All right.
What am I grateful for? Actually, how can you top that one? How can you top I'm grateful for everything? Because it is actually that. That's what we're here to do. We're here to be grateful for everything. And if you do single out one thing, you're missing out on the whole thing.
Yeah.
So actually, damn good idea.
Yeah.
Damn good idea. I'm grateful for everything.
Grateful for everything.
Well, I'm going to break that in here. It is grateful for everything, but what I'm going to be grateful for, because I want to undo time, is I'm going to say I'm grateful for this now present moment.
Exactly. There we go. You always find a way to one up the whole thing. One up the whole thing.
So, I think that's good. Oh, and the last thing, after what you just said about bringing goddess into the world, Sevan, I'm going to send you privately the video that came out at that last Kundalini round since we last had our last interview. It's Durga. Oh, wait till you see what Durga had to say.
Oh my goodness! There's green throw up a tongue twice as long as the normal human. That kind of thing.
Just in the morning.
Hey, man, I'm just waking up.
All right, everyone.
Okay.
Man, you're a legend. Lovely to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
You too, Brett.
No,
likewise.
I love you from many levels and dimensions, Sevan.
Much love.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thanks. This has been Consciousness Caffeine Radio. We have had Sevan Bomar live on conspiracy and the secrets of the English language. Join us next time because Goddess only knows what's going to come out of him. And it's always, oh, there goes my camera. Human and making errors. But whatever goes on here, your school is playing and learning all this. It's playing. It's not work. It's not sitting there reading the books like we had to. This is playing. So if you want to come play with us and get this party started to explode syntropic consciousness all over the planet and consciousness caffeine. See you next time. Peace, love, abundance, and joy.
Wholeness.
Peace out.
Yellow star. I'll message you. Love you.
And sit down.